Like, are viewing moderatism as a form of apologia.
That's not even a moderate take. To pack the courts is not a moderate take. I don't know.
Well, so I mean, like, I guess anything that would be viewed as an alternative to their position seems like an apologia for whatever problem they're trying to address.
I don't know what their position is. What exactly do they want to do? If it's not end the filibuster, which I have issues with, but packing the courts, I'm on board now, gang. I've changed my position on this. I think that before all this, right? Like, I was like, packing the courts. I don't know, gang. But after ending Roe v. Wade, no, that's a boom. Let's fire. Let's do it. Right?
Are you serious, Wick? Are you serious? Why did it take this to?
Because I thought, like, look, initially when the Roe v. Wade, before the Roe v. Wade stuff, right? The decisions had been mixed in the Supreme Court, right? There were some good ones I thought they made, and some bad ones, right? And it felt weird to pack the courts over that. But this kind of thing, like, when we look at steps forward and what to do, if we look at things that can work and historically have worked in the past, this is one of those things. Like, in FDR tried to do it, he failed to do it, but just the threat of doing it, just the credible threat of doing it, caused his legislation to go through more.
But dude, this danger was always there. We said this danger was always there. They said, right? Like, it's not as if it was me, like, interpreting me or other people, interpreting like tea leaves as to what the Republicans might do. They kept saying, we're going to fucking do this. They appointed judges specifically to do this, right? They said, hey, you want to turn Roe v. Wade, right? And they're like, yeah, I'm going to fucking do that, right? And they packed the courts, not packed, but like they filled the courts with their people, right? All for this one singular purpose. And then, and I remember, Wick, because I know your former position on this, because I've argued with you on this, right? I'm like, oh, this is gonna happen, and we gotta fight back, and this is the way, right? But I don't understand what has changed though. Because your objections to packing the court previously was that, well, the Republicans, when they get in office, they can pack the court too, and there'll be a war, and then the whole thing will fall apart.
I don't think I said anything about a war.
You definitely said that. You definitely said that.
It's been long enough. But there are dangers to it, right? Like, I do not think that there are no longer dangers to it. I just think that the imminent threat to Roe v. Wade is real enough. Obviously, it's gone, right? That this is a solution that before I didn't advocate for, and now I do. And I don't know why me changing my mind of this is seen as a bad thing.
No,
like, why am I getting shit?
No, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just blatantly ridiculing you for having the previous position in the first place. It's good that you're on the right side, but like it just doesn't. I say your previous. My problem is your reasoning, right? Your reasoning for being on that other side, right? It's good that you're here now, but like that reasoning is important because, or else it's going to lead you to other takes which you might regret in the future. So
no, you're exactly right. This ain't the panel for it. Let's come on and talk to you about it later.
Absolutely.
But because I do have reasoning for why it's changed, but this isn't the place for it. Monday, like I said, we're gonna have an all-woman panel. We got Stabby coming on. We got Ginger Ramoth coming on. We got a few others that I've reached out to. Hopefully we'll say yes and we'll come on. We'll have Madam Genevieve, and we'll have a wonderful discussion and talk about steps forward. But what bothered me was all the LARPer takes on this today. All this stuff like violence in the streets, overthrowing the government. Things
that ain't happening. That's really dumb. Yeah,
it's really dumb. It's counterproductive. And let's not do that. But anyway, gang, that's not the topic today. This is my fault for derailing even before we got going. But I want to talk about, because that's not the only issue that's on the table here. Recently, FINA, the governing body of women's sport, swimming, has made a rule change that I think is very concerning, and I want to discuss it. And I've brought a lovely slew of guests. We have one more waiting, but she said she's going to be 15 minutes, so we're gonna start without her. She can jump in. But you guys, I love you guys. You all know me. You've all been on here before. You know how I work. I'll introduce the topic, attack each other's ideas rather than each other, and we'll just kind of get on to. I'll give everyone an opening statement, a chance to introduce themselves, and then we'll try to, go for it. Give me a second. Okay. Recently, FINA instituted a rule that all athletes not experiencing any part of male puberty beyond Tanner stage 2 or before age 12, whichever is later. The claim is that this is due to the performance gap they allege appears between males and females during puberty. Is this fair? Does this effectively ban transgender athletes from these events? Is this necessary, and should it be applied at all levels, even high school or elementary or things like that? We'll start off with Madden, please.
Sure. I have a more written statement this time, so if you would bear with me, I'd appreciate that. Jesus Christ. Okay. So, I want trans women competing in elite women's sports. However, as many leading experts in the field, notably I did a lot of research into Joanna Harper, who helped set the 2015 IOC recommendations. I think generally the quote-unquote anti-grooming bills that have propped up around the nation have been very, very hurtful and have kind of muddied the water in terms of conversations. In Ohio, only a week ago, a provision was moved where kids accused of lying about their sex assigned at birth would undergo genital examination by, I guess, faculty. And this opens children up to sexual assault, as well as furthering the moral panic around trans folks in the nation. But when you get into the very specific niche conversation of trans women in elite women's sports, there's a lot of things that needs to be addressed with a lot of care. Otherwise, it's a hotbed for turf talking points. I would appreciate the back and forth more so than my opening, but I think the most important framing is the discussion. It is premature to empirically know whether or not inclusion of trans women poses a threat to competitive integrity of elite women's sport. And this presents trans women a moral high ground where they could abstain from participation until more evidence is known.
Okay, thank you. PrimeCayes, please.
Hi. Yeah. This is absolutely a ban on our trans brothers and sisters participating in sports, in those sports. And like it's I think it's interesting in the way they formulated this, right? To give themselves some sort of space. Like I'm curious, like if it's in their own heads, they actually believe that no, I'm not like a bad guy here, right? Not bad guy. I am not. I haven't instituted a transphobic rule. Like I've given space that yeah, theoretically someone could, but of course, knowing the state of our body politic of the laws, that people just aren't going to be able to clear this bar. And I think that they can continuously state that they're following the science by like banning a whole group of individuals from the sport. But I think we can all see they have deeper intentions.
Okay, thank you. Professor Meat, please.
Yeah, this is really, as we all know, this is a really difficult subject. I think it's one of those issues that there is no perfect answer. The difficulties were like we didn't choose the universe we were born into. Like the difficulties that are at play here are not necessarily ones that have a perfect answer. And insofar as that is the case, I think that the appropriate action in response to the severity of the issue is actually to treat it with the appropriate amount of care. And to me, that rather than rushing it means and trying to force something for the sake of necessarily competitive fairness, we need to balance those issues, those interests against like basically trying to have a reasonable enough approach that's grounded enough in reality and in the science that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot when we're trying to advocate for our trans brothers and sisters, as has been put so far. And I basically think that this is an imperfect solution, but it, at least if I'm talking directionally, with the change is, like, at least to me, indicates an attempt to move in the right direction and have an imperfect solution that is at least grounded in science for now, while we figure out what the science is.
Okay, so just to be clear, you're for the change.
I'm basically for the change. I actually think, like, there are other changes that I would like to see, instead. But basically speaking,
for asking this during opening statements, but I was just wanting to make that clear. Rose Malay, please.
Thanks for getting right. So trans women aren't getting rid of women's sports. I think that's a narrative that I don't buy into. I don't think this ruling is fair. I think it effectively bans trans women from sports, like in the vast, vast majority of cases. I think the ruling is way too extreme. There's no nuance to it at all. You're looking at one extreme case, and then you're doing the absolute opposite extreme, which can be really harmful to trans women who just want to compete. And yeah, that's my stance on it.
Okay, somebody online, please.
Wick, I appreciate it. So I had to look into this a little bit because I don't know if you guys remember, I've made some pretty egregious takes on the subject recently without knowing everything about what I was talking about. But FINA, I looked up. I needed to find out what it stands for. Is Fédération Internationale des Nations, which is a French pronunciation. In English, it's the International Swimming Federation. They govern swimming, diving, high diving, artistic swimming, and water polo and open swimming. They have a contact with the Olympic organization, which is the main reason why these people's opinion matters so much. They've been around for over 100 years. They're based in Sweden. Their current president, Hussein al-Musallam, was elected in 2021. He is a gentleman from Kuwait. He is replacing the gentleman from Uruguay, who's been the president since 2009. I do understand that they are making these recent changes. I think that there is no illusion why they're making these changes. When we are talking about the Olympic sports, there is this like broad need to try to satisfy like the entire world's view. And I think that trying to frame this as something that like this is based on what's going on in the United States and with United States politics in particular is missing kind of the overall mark on what may be causing like this general thing. Not to say that I agree with it. I think that this is banning all trans peoples from sports, and I do not think that that is a good thing. I think that they are not using the right science by any standards or any means, and I think that they need to revisit this. But again, I think that when we look at why they are doing this and who it is that is doing this, I'm not surprised that they are.
Okay, thank you. We have Holly Biscotti. Is that how you want your name said?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm not too happy with the decision, but I guess it's prudent enough that I'll take it for now. I'm still in the group of that the male category should be restricted to males, and the male category should be open, and the female category should be a closed category, only restricted to females. I guess my biggest issue with this decision is that there's going to be some sort of push that if someone wants to transition and they're athlete or something like that, that people are going to try to rush it to pass under the bar, if you will. So we need to hurry up and get this, the medical transition and everything going earlier, because we don't want to, pass this 12-year mark, because then, you pass. And if other agencies and other sports start adopting this, I think there might be some sort of rush to help someone to begin transitioning before 12. And I wouldn't want that to happen, but I'll take the decision for now.
Okay. So before we get into openings, just so we're very clear, I want to just see where you all stand on this, right? And then we can just go back and forth. But just click yes or no. Do you believe trans women who went through puberty have a physical advantage? Yes or no? Just real quick. What do you think, man?
Yes, there's been different studies on like hemoglobin that has been like
just we can get that in the opening, but just I want.
Okay. Yes and no is kind of weird, but okay, sure.
Okay. Yes. Prime.
Yes or no is weird. It's not a yes or no question, actually.
Yeah, it's not. No.
But I will say that they might have a slight advantage.
Okay, Professor Meat.
Yes. It seems like everything that I've looked at seems to basically speaking. Well, it actually, all right. To be fair, it is sort of weird because
gang, this isn't time for discussion. I just want
they can't follow the instructions.
Mostly yes.
Okay, Rose Malay.
I'll say.
Somewhat depends on the case.
Okay, that's fair. Somebody.
Yeah, I can't answer this question. I'd have to say no based on the information I have.
Okay. And Holly Biscotti.
Yes.
Okay. With that, gloves off. Go at it, gang.
I mean,
okay.
Well, I guess we can disagree with that first. Like, we need to be able to come to some type of understanding about the types of advantages that are at play here, because it seems, basically speaking, that like, while there are our studies about this are really imperfect, right? And especially because of the fact that, like, oh my God, if we're talking about the kind of a performance you can achieve, there's basically no information about like trained transitioners from before and after, because especially when you look at myonuclei, that's a huge thing that plays into that. That being said, the only studies that I've been able to find, there was an 8-person study that was done very recently, fortunately very small, on trained people, and it basically showed it seemed to indicate that maybe the differences like really disappear after like 15 years of HRT, but then you run into a whole new problem, because if you're waiting 15 years for HRT, you've basically missed your window for being an athlete. And so I guess, like, for those on the panel who don't think there's a difference, what are we still in disagreement? Because I have like a wealth of studies that show, although a mitigated difference after HRT, when after you've experienced puberty, there's the differences. They become mitigated, but they're still very noticeable even after like 2 or 3 years from when I've looked at it.
I think it's pointless to discuss. I just had this conversation with someone the other day on my channel. And I think it's kind of a pointless conversation to be focusing on, hey, someone in sports has an advantage, right? Like, that's sports. It's literally sports, right? I think it's interesting that we make a special exception here, right? Like, if you take a cis woman who is born like taller, who is just can put on more pounds of muscle because of her frame, who has like a better lung capacity, right? Like, has all these things that we oftentimes attribute to men, but just happens to be cis, she's okay, right? But this other person who has a reduced capability because of HRT, right? But, you know, just happens to have some residual advantages. This other person, this trans woman, is definitely not okay. Like that, I don't see it, right? Like, sports is all about people who have advantages, whether through skill or through genetics. So it's
right. So I think
we should just have an open category then, right? No male, no female division, right?
No, it's
pretty.
Well, that's the thing, is that we're trying to counterbalance these things, right? Because to
finish up me, but then Madden wants to go, so finish briefly and then let Madden in.
Okay, yeah, I'll try to just really quickly say, like, well, that's sort of the point, is that, like, there's some truth to both of these things. The fact is that, like, yes, to some degree, all competition is like arbitrary, and we decide what competition is. We decide what axis we compete across and what is fair. But the thing is that there's a whole bunch of factors that go into that, which is why, like, for example, we don't necessarily have just an open category for all people right now. We separate the sports sometimes by weight class, oftentimes by gender, to both protect certain classes, allow people access, and also for the sake of the utility that we get out of the entertainment, the market of allowing more people to participate, allowing more fields of interest to be maintained by having like a greater variety of competition. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll keep it as brief at that.
Yeah. I'll let Ninetales go after this. But,
after.
But one point on that is
Ninetales can open.
You're talking about the market of the sports, and that was one of the criteria that FINA used its or made its decision on, is like what is the history, or what does the future of the sport look like if this is not implemented. But we can get Ninetales, let her open.
By all means, Ninetales, welcome.
Hi, I'm still setting up my stream. Can I have like 2 minutes?
Take your time.
Okay, I got it.
Just let me know when you're ready. If you have any other further thoughts, Madden, please.
Yeah, Prime mentioned that sports are always going to favor like genetic outliers and such. That it's always been the case for cis people. Why are we now making such a fuss when it's trans people? One very, very interesting thing, especially in the conversation of aquatic sports, is body fat percentage and how that not only attributes to how much of your proportion of your body can be muscle compared to fat, and also this factors in very interestingly to aquatic sports in that it affects buoyancy as well for swimming. You can get down into single digits for AMAB folks, but AFAB folks can't like break 12 without like losing brain function.
So I can respond to that both really quickly and do my introduction, which I hope it's okay. It's a little bit longer. Wait, you said wait?
No, I said please. I'm encouraging you to go on.
Yes. Wait. I don't want to hinder your ability to moderate. So body fat percentages are heavily affected by hormone levels. This means that when a trans woman takes feminizing HRT, her body fat levels will probably match that of a female and vice versa. Okay, wow, just had to deal with so much. I'm just so worked up. So I really did break down this intro, by the way, but I'm Ninetails Cosmic Fox, debater extraordinaire. In fact, the first thing I ever debated online was this on Modern Day Debates, no less. So here I am, and this is my intro. The slanted policy of inclusion essentializes trans athletes and the reasons behind transitioning down to the ability. Oh wait, is that really my start? Yeah, I guess. To dominate women, while also reducing all athletes down to a body where specific traits can make or break them, rather than their. You know what? Fuck it. I'm probably gonna say all this at some point, anyways. This is about the swimming thing. I just want to make some specific points about that. I don't want to read all this. Because I still need to set up my actual stream.
Yeah, do what your heart tells you, okay? Like, this is your time to shine. Go ahead.
Yeah, with the swimming thing, I think it's interesting that it only targets trans females, because it really does like show where the point of the conversation is. A lot of the things that experts write about point out that both sides are to blame when it comes to like dogmatizing this stuff, and I don't want to do that when it comes to performing to athletic advantages. What I do want to say is, like, generally speaking, a lot of these policies tend to be informed based on they tend to be informed based on whether or not the what the people want to happen is fair. And in reality, like, it depends heavily on where you place your values. I think if you want to be a trans ally in general, you definitely cannot take things that you don't understand or don't know here and run with that as a reason to exclude trans people. If you're a trans ally, you're fighting to include trans people, and sport as a socialization for kids also means including them with their peers. If we exclude them in that, then that's very harmful. So I think what's being done here to protect the interest of cisgendered athletes at the expense of transgendered athletes is very nearsighted and has a lot to do with the narrativizing of the discussion. And going back to what I was going to quickly say in my introduction, we need to have a better faith discussion than assuming that trans athletes are simply transitioning for the sake of having an advantage. Not only is that unseen, it's just virtually like ridiculous to most trans people who understand like what transitioning is about. And if you think about it, like it's a lot to really expect from somebody who might be cisgender to just be like, I'm gonna live as a different identity. Also, that way I can win competition. So furthermore, I think this also essentializes the athlete, because the athlete is not just a set of competitive advantages. Maybe at the end of the day, at the highest elite level, that's where it counts. But in general sport, it's either just like recreation, where those things probably don't really matter that much, or they're actually training. And we're not talking about the how important it is to have training and discipline when you're an athlete.
Yeah. Madden, you had your hand up?
So I don't think anyone here, I'm not sure if you like caught our openings or anything, but I don't think anyone is here suggesting that trans women are transitioning just to get a competitive advantage.
Well, I think the bill makes this
Please
decision
let
makes
Madden
the assumption.
finish. You gotta let Madden finish her point. So
I was clarifying.
And the FINA ruling does expand from not just trans women, but you say that any attempt to exclude trans women is not good allyship, but would you classify Joanne Harper's whose studies led to the implementation of the 2015 IOC recommendations, which they've now abandoned in order for the individual leagues to make their own rules, as FINA has. She specifically outlined that you need 12 months of reduced T levels and HRT to participate. Would you say that Joanna Harper is not a good trans ally, being a trans woman herself?
Here's the thing, is like, when we're talking about this, we're rhetoricians. I'm sorry. We're not experts. We're not researchers in the field. I hardly consider myself to have researched this well, and I've prepared for this debate probably 5 or 6 times at this point. I think I've done at least 2 panels on Prime's panels before on the trans athlete thing. So this is not a new issue to me, and I still feel like there's so much more we need to understand. And so when people are making prescriptions either way, I think they're coming up from a point where there's a lack of understanding first rather than understanding. For someone who's researched stuff and things like that, and I'm not sure specifically what you're referring to with Joanna Harper thing, but at least if they've done research and that research can be scientifically validated, I'm more inclined to say that, like, at least they're doing the research than to simply ask myself, are they a trans ally or not?
Okay, Rose Malay, you wanted to interject? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I want to mention, I transitioned when I was 14 years old. Like, I'm weak. I couldn't even make a team. I think for this ruling to say that it's unfair for me to compete is a joke. And that's the main issue I have with this rule, right? For someone like me who was on puberty blockers, but maybe didn't transition at like age 12 or age 11, it's not the same as someone who completed male puberty, or someone like Leah Thomas who has years of, actual experience swimming as a male. I think that the ruling makes no distinction, and that's the big, I don't necessarily think that people should be banned in general, but if Leah Thomas was banned, I wouldn't cry about it. I'd be like, okay, but they take one extreme and they give this other extreme. The old rules were fine. We had 2 years on estrogen. There was a T-level mandate that wasn't as extreme as it was. And it's just a scientific fact that HRT does weaken you. So where after you take HRT for a bit, you're not the same physically as you were before you transitioned, right? All the studies say this. Of course, the main question debate people have is how much? Is it the same as cis women? I think it's enough to basically warrant trans women being on the cis women team, but I don't think it's maybe 100%. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
Yeah.
So I think I was going to say I think we're in a difficult place because it's an imperfect question that needs an imperfect problem, and we're gonna have imperfect solutions. Not everyone is going to be happy with this, but it seems to me like a best attempt at a compromise because they're also leaving a path forward for the future. I think it's important to recognize that we don't necessarily want to. It's not that we don't want to include trans people, it's that we don't want to rush it and do it wrong, and that can sound like apologia, but I genuinely believe that is the best path forward if we actually care about trans advocacy. That being said, I think that Prime has touched on sure. I appreciate that, and I think Prime touched, accurately on basically it's totally arbitrary in a certain extent, where we draw the lines of what are the groupings that we're trying to compete with, right? Like people, Michael Phelps, should he be banned from swimming because he has some insane mutation that gives him a really specific set of properties with certain muscle groupings and with his metabolism and his ability and his respiratory system, not necessarily, right? What sort of decisions are we making, right? And so in this case, but at the same time, we wouldn't necessarily have a wide open category. And if you take this to its logical extreme, theoretically, if we got good enough at detecting these things, we would only be competing against ourselves, and we don't want that either. So I think that what we really need to be doing is in my mind, what that point points to is the fact that we need to start questioning as the reality of gender starts to become more fluid and more dynamic and more complex in our lived society. We need to start questioning what exactly are these lines that we're trying to draw. And while it's really hard to tell a society, hey, male, female, we're just going to totally get these out of the way and start replacing them with something else, I would be down for certain types of regulations around perhaps BMI, combined with certain hormone profiles. We could solve this problem tomorrow if we had the technology and the science and the data, but we just don't. We're still gathering that data. That being said, I guess like while we're figuring out, it seems like they're open to some kind of open category, and maybe that can be a stepping stone towards trying to restructure these systems and these categories in a way that is more inclusive, that isn't necessarily just along these constructs of gender. But we're just not quite there with the science, and this seems like a sort of compromise because most of the advantages of puberty, a vast majority of them, are alleviated at that age.
Okay. Ninetales, you went in, and anyone else who wants in who feels they can't get in, Alpha Hands gang. Okay, so Madden and Prime after Ninetales. So Ninetales, Madden, Prime,
Don't
and
forget Holly.
Raise your hand up. Okay.
Alpha.
Okay, so yeah, it's nice to be on the better end of Meat's side for once. So I just wanted to push back on a bit of whether or not we should accept 2 years HRT. For now, that I think that is a good baseline, so we don't unnecessarily exclude people who wouldn't have those advantages. But there are still some advantages in body weight, body fat distribution issues that aren't totally changed until about 5 years. So I'm guessing that depending on the sport, depending on the direct advantages that we can observe, trans people are getting from being able to enter it too early. We will need to change that and adjust that accordingly to context. So the line itself for fairness in sport isn't necessarily arbitrary. I actually have had to come around from this. The division between gender and sport, under the assumption that their hormone levels are normative to the gender they were born as, does make sense because pound for pound, males are stronger than women. Cross-sectionally, the difference in muscle between men and women is actually no different. So if a woman with the same cross-sectional size of muscle will have the same power output as a male with the same power output. So it's going to be whether or not hormones actually reduce that cross-sectional diameter and whether or not their BMI reflects women for a large part of whether or not something like the advantages from height are absolved, and it seems like they are. I think only having 10% of the strength left, but also being on average taller is more of a limiter because you have less torque per radial degree of movement on action. Because the longer your limb is, the longer the radial moment is, and so you're putting more strength into that. And there's also more degree for loss of accuracy in a longer movement. So there's actually a lot of challenges you face by being taller and having less strength as a female over male, or someone who's gone over HRT, I should say.
Okay, so Madden, then Prime, then some dummy when it ends. So
sure. So I think an important part to focus in on is the it's kind of like a coward's position, but there's no kind of evidence to lock you in either side of the debate to the point where Joanna Harper would point to recent studies into hemoglobin saying that between 4 to 6 months of HRT puts you at a very similar and competitive range of women. So for endurance sports, that could be very, very important. However, as Ninetales kind of put it out, the body fat distribution is very, very important, especially in aquatic sports. I think one thing that I really wish FINA had looked into, as opposed to setting a very, very strict limit at 12, which kind of fails a vibe check for me, is I wish they would have looked into regulating body fat percentages. It's a lot easier to account for, as opposed to taking regular piss tests and stuff like that, like the old IOC recommendation. And it seems as though it's a very, very... it would be in the interest of competitive integrity to do it that way.
Can I just quickly, can I have one moment, because I forgot to comment on something I meant to respond to, and this way I won't have to do it later.
If it's brief, then we got to get other people in here.
Yeah, so. In terms of having separate categories for trans people, at the elite level, this is kind of sad to realize, but anything beneath that, it's going to be an opportunity cost for trans people. They're not going to, and it's going to have a socialization cost for trans kids. Sorry.
Don't choke to death on my stream. That's not allowed. That's a rule we have. Everyone must remain alive. Okay,
no promises.
Prime, please.
F you, all right? Zombies' lives matter. I think, jumping off of what Ninetales just said, like, the idea of having a trans-only category, like, how many trans individuals are athletes, right? Who can make it to whatever level it is, right? Like, how many of them are they going to be competing? It's an empty category. Like, to do that, to separate that, right? A separate but equal category, yeah, that's going to go well, right? It's great. You're basically saying, yeah, you guys go over there. If we can put together 5 of you to compete, maybe we'll have a competition someday. Like, whatever, plainly fucking ridiculous idea. But I was asked, whether we should have an open category, and maybe. It depends on the sport. I don't pretend to be an expert on. I don't care about sports. But like I don't pretend to be an expert and say which sports would be most appropriate to have one of those. But there are other reasons to separate by gender, other than like advantages. So just like for instance, I know this is not the same thing, but follow me, right? Just like how. In terms of acting, right? When we give out the awards, the Oscars, right? We got best male performer and female performer, because like we want to give shine to women, right? Like we want to give them a space where they don't necessarily have to compete with men who are more well established, right? So that's the reasoning.
Opportunities,
yeah. So that's the reasoning there. But that could also be a reasoning in sports as well. Just like, we want to give more opportunities for women, like to have those women champions where you might not otherwise have them. So yeah, there's plenty of reasons why you might want to separate that.
Why wouldn't you not otherwise have them?
Why wouldn't you not otherwise have them? Sorry, what? Could you explain?
Well, you said it wasn't due to competitive advantage. Then why wouldn't you not otherwise have women if there was all open categories?
Well, like inclusion on the stage of society, on like the world stage, on the national stage or something like that, like making groups feel represented, giving them a voice, and something like that. Am I misunderstanding you, Prime? Was it?
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, we could do that for inclusion or like whatever, right? Like to have a just have a category for them that is separate, but one that's just have a category for them.
So that makes sense, in the acting sense. But if you're talking about sports, if they're competing, then there should be women champions. There would be women people who would win if we just had an open category, right?
Yeah, so, I agree. I said that. I said that maybe it might make sense. But I'm saying there are also other reasons other than necessarily physical advantage, right? That we might have a separate one, right? So like there's the advantages in some sports like boxing, right? Boxing might be something that we definitely need a gender divide there. That's okay. But in another sport that might not be the case, but still in that other sport, I don't know which one it might be. I don't know, like skiing, maybe skiing. But we still might want space for women champions. Maybe that makes sense. As a society, we might decide that that we want them separate so that women just have a chance to shine.
Well, I've looked at like all the Olympic records, and I think the only one.
I'm gonna let you finish, Haley, but then we gotta go to Some Dummy Online Who's Been Waiting, and then Professor Mead after that. So finish your point, and we're gonna go to Some Dummy Online, and then Professor Mead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so if you look at like all the Olympic world records, when it comes to men and women, 99.9% of them, the men's time is always faster. The men are always stronger. So to say that the reason that we're dividing these is not because of competitive advantage, it doesn't seem to make sense.
That's not what I said, though.
Oh, right? You said there could be other reasons. You said there could.
I said there could be other reasons why society might want to make that divide, right? I said that depending on the sport, right? And it could be sport. Again, I'm not an expert in.
And I just told you that 99% of the sports.
Yeah. Whatever, right? So like anything. I don't know. Again, the point is that even if we found a sport in which like the gender divide didn't provide such an advantage, right? A noticeable advantage. If we found one, there might be another overriding reason not to. That's what I said.
Yeah, but this phantom sport that might exist, that might be this outlier 1% of sports, doesn't matter.
Brooming, what's that?
For this conversation?
Curling.
Brooming sport?
Curling.
Like, fuck.
Giga Chad.
Yeah.
Fencing.
Possibly fencing. Yeah, possibly fencing. There might be a whole litany of sports. I'm sorry, I'm not a sports expert, so I'll leave it there, right? But like, there's like a whole list. I'm sure there's
League
a
of
sports
Legends.
and there's esports. I didn't want to bring it up, but there's also esports. But I'll pull back from that. But even if we're living in the physical world, even when we live in the physical world, there is definitely some things, right, where there's not this massive gender divide, something that can't be. And even if there is, maybe it might be so small that something that can't be overcome with skill. So I don't know. Like, if you want me to go through down the Olympic sports and figure out something there, I can do that. But it doesn't actually matter because that wasn't my point.
Okay, sometime be online, the Professor Meet, and if anyone else wants in, Alpha Hands. Thank you.
Gee willikers, I really do appreciate it, Wick. Man, oh man, I feel like we're all over the place. So a lot of this, I feel like, kind of stems back to the Tour de France and our good friend, what was his name? The Armstrong gentleman.
Louis Armstrong.
The one with the trumpet. Anyway, so the guy where he had the issue where there was like the blood doping scheme and like we're adding testosterone to our body to gain a competitive edge. Now, this was a cishet male or a cis male like using testosterone to like boost his performance in his sport. And so now all of a sudden we're looking at hormones like, oh my gosh, they're performance enhancing drugs. And we need to make sure that people aren't participating in these sports using these performance enhancing drugs. But at some point, we're talking about personal identity and we're talking about like who can and who can't compete in these different fields. And again, I think that we need very good science to determine which categories everybody belongs in. And we need good scientists to determine the best possible way to divide people into appropriate categories. I'm kind of in favor of this idea of like an open category because then it's going to make it so that like the best of the best competitors, everybody's going to watch this to see the best of the best. And if we're looking for like more diversity and we're looking for different styles of play, we can look at each of the different categories as we go on because each division is going to have a different character and a different style to the way that everybody plays these things. But I also understand that in a lot of situations, dividing along gender lines can be a very important factor to like separating out the way that we want people to compete in these different categories. Again, we have to look at whoever is choosing to organize these competitions and go, okay, you guys have the right and the ability to choose how you are going to organize these things. And if people don't like the way that they're organizing the events, people have to go out and watch other events or organize other events to try to get around these organizations. And unfortunately, that might mean that we need to make a new Olympic sport somehow.
Okay.
I'm done.
Yeah, Professor Meat, then Ninetales, and again, if people want to, and then Madden.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it seems like the conversation's moved heavily into the conversation of an open category. I think we've all touched accurately on the fact that like we want representation, that values, but there's this difficulty that comes in, like we all want some path forward for like representation, trans representation in sports, but there's these practical determinations and all of these other things that are part of the equation of how we draw these lines in sports that we have to counterbalance against each other, and it makes it really murky. The open category is a good idea in this sense of representation. It would be an easy solution, right? Slap an open category label on there. Everybody gets to compete. We're golden. We've done it. But we're done. We've done it, right? But
human rights solved.
Right, exactly. But then there's a few practical problems, right? If we just have a separate category just for trans, right? Like maybe in a theoretical world that could work, but there's so few trans athletes right now that we like. I mean, we can get into why, but I hope at least that we all are aware of like the reality of like both school funding and like the minutia of contestants you would have at top levels, like where that's not only is that probably not a useful category, but it's also a useful answer, but it's probably also not a very satisfying answer for the trans community. So when we start talking about open categories, like subsuming other categories into open categories is like an idea I'm somewhat in favor of as maybe a solution in the meantime. But it's still imperfect because it sort of leaves trans men out to dry. Because the only the only consistent standards we could have, the only reasons we could maybe, and part of the reason why they focused on trans women as opposed to trans men is because the trans women are the people who are worried about having quote unquote unfair advantages or advantages that come up in the sport in problematic ways. And we don't want to rush these things in a way that hurts trans advocacy, right? So For all of those reasons, again, I don't know if it's a perfect solution, but I look at this rule change and it seems like I see a group trying to do the best they can with their data, and they're not trying to rush to. They're trying to at least it seems like it's moving in the direction of trying to do the best they can with the available data in a way that doesn't necessarily hurt trans advocacy and has a path forward. Okay. Because we're not quite there at the point that we have the perfect solution.
Okay, so we're gonna go to Ninetales, then Madden, and then Rose Malay when it in. And then I have a question for the panel, just to kind of maybe direct this a little bit. But please, Ninetales.
So yeah, I don't think open category should exist at all as a solution that specifically justifies the omission of trans women from normative competition, because the two are never going to be treated as equally glorious and stuff like that. And the one is always going to be revered differently than the other. And I think assuming that it won't be, and assuming that it's suddenly equal or even better is a bit naive, knowing like how humans tend to treat things. Without knowing the harm we are trying to mitigate, we can't effectively propose solutions. So kind of going off of what Professor Meat says, I think a lot of these solutions we're proposing are very premature relative to what is the actual harm. You know, where's the actual opportunity cost we're seeing? We're seeing a lot of people crying because they have to compete with trans women. But then where is the actual research that has a control and that we can actually know whether or not a trans woman excluded a cis woman from sport unfairly at that matter, which is an even harder thing to prove, in my opinion.
Or disprove. Yeah. It's very difficult one way or the other, and we don't have conclusive data. The data generally sort of like, if you were to make best guesses, I would say that the data sort of indicates like in favor of advantages. There definitely seem to be, I mean, obviously at a certain point there are some clear advantages that come up as far as I can tell. But
I've read 3+ papers where it details very, very clearly that between respiratory function, height, body mass, like body fat percentage, I meant, there seems to, the evidence leans in favor of an advantage. However, or at least some sort of concern for competitive integrity. And then when it gets to like the prescription at the end of the paper, it says, oh, we're just going to abolish all gendered categories of sports. And we're going to have this cool system that not only judges for body attributes, but also for socioeconomic factors, which is like, sure, maybe that would be a good system, but when is that ever going to happen? And I've seen like 3 papers that all detail that, hey, there's a concern for competitive integrity, but we're not my problem. We're gonna go for the computer system instead.
The concern has yet to be realized in the actual sports themselves. Trans women are just simply not dominating. And on top of that, like when we focus on like these particular traits, what we also should be saying is we don't actually know how much of an advantage these traits are. They're hardly 100% advantage in their own right. Right. Like I said, just being taller doesn't necessarily mean that you can swing a bat better, because if you don't have the musculature to actually have accuracy and power behind it, you're technically losing torque and accuracy.
But given that you don't have evidence to say that there is no concern for competitive integrity, like, are you just supposed to allow all trans women to play sports?
No, I don't think we should. Well, I guess, yeah, we shouldn't exclude people until we have objective data that there's a harm to be absolved, because it's not even until then that we'll know what to do. And exclusion itself is inherently violent. So if we're trying to avoid violence, using that as a solution is kind of
backwards. I think it's inherently violent in elite sports. I think you get to the realm of violence when you're
no, because we're saying that the opportunity, if we're saying that the opportunity cost for cis women is that they're being excluded from elite sports, then the same should apply to trans women, that that there's an opportunity cost that's violent to them.
In regular sports?
From regular and elite sports.
No, it's true. It's an entire different conversation. Elite sports, there's much more concern for competitive
integrity.
Is
it the trans person's fault that there's not enough research done? No. So why are we doing things that persecute?
Right, but it's not about being their fault, right? Like
gang.
That's what it ends up treating them as.
Respond real quick to this. I'm gonna let Madden respond real quick, and then Rose Malay needs in, and then Professor Mead after you can go. And I think Holly wanted in as well. So go ahead.
So if Leah Thomas was continued to race and like won records, and at that point a cis woman wouldn't be able to obtain those records because of these concerns that have already been published about. At that point, like what do you do? Are we gonna find that there's been this advantage and then we're gonna take away that record? Or
so far we only have a sample of one. So there's not much we can do.
Joanna Harper is like
how do you know? But how do you know that if this swimmer wasn't reborn as a female in an alternate universe, but with the same other genetic physiological traits that they would have naturally inherited, because there's many chromosomes, not just the sex chromosomes, how do you know that they wouldn't have already still had an advantage over their cisgendered counterparts?
The thing is that we don't have enough evidence to say either way. So to prematurely allow all all trans women to participate in protected womenens categories could do irreparable harm.
No, it's not going to do irreparable harm. We can retract records.
Hey, stop.
Retract records.
Stop real quick. I'm going to let you respond. I'm going to let you finish, Ninetales, but I just want to make sure after that we have to go to Rose. Please.
I am done. I just disagree. It's irreparable because we're talking about things on paper.
Rose, please.
So I just want to mention, because people bring up this open category thing all the time, and it really frustrates me. The open category doesn't work, okay? Even if we're like, it's really discriminatory. Point blank, just like asking people like trans only, you can't be in it. Like, but even if you ignore that, the simple cost of setting up a league just for a certain small percentage of the population, it's not logistical. It's not realistic. I don't know why anybody suggests it. Nobody's going to watch
That's not what open category means. Like,
not necessary. It's not usually what the open category idea means.
Let Rose finish. Yeah. Let Rose finish. Then if you want to respond real quick, Haley, you may.
Like, I meant like when people say like, oh, we need to have like a third like league for just trans people. But if it's like everybody from all genders competes and you like eliminate women's sports, that's pretty much what I had to say. I don't think,
Okay. So if you want to respond to that, Haley, real quick, but then Meat's next. So go ahead.
Yeah. So like the open category simply mean getting rid of the male and female sports. It wouldn't be just a transgender category where only transgender people compete, because that wouldn't be open. That would be like a closed category. An open category would be, hey, everyone just competes.
I have to go
the open category is usually the men's. Okay. The men's category becomes an open, and then there is a protected women's category. Is usually what discussions around this open category look like. Men's is expanded, and then there's still a protected women's category.
No, that's how it is right now. The men's category has always been an open category. It always has been. It's the women's category that was closed. But in response to this discussion that we're having, people are saying, well, if you're concerned with these competitive advantages and you have an issue with these segregations, we'll just have an open category and just put everyone together.
Well, maybe I'm just putting myself different from that.
Well, no, there would technically, if you're just talking about the men's category being an open category, there would technically be differences in the sense that like women, like biological women, born women, could theoretically still compete in the men's category, which I don't know if that's the case today. Maybe it is. Maybe you know more than I do. But also the other difference would be that, I just had it. That's the main difference. I'll just leave it there for now. Oh, the other difference would be that you're protecting the women's category in a way that you weren't before. Like this would include like a change into the women's category to not necessarily allow trans women.
Well, it was your turn next, Professor Meat. But then Ninetales really wants in. So
I'll just I will say
and Rose as well. So after.
Here's the problem with the idea of and sorry if we are finding ourselves at odds again, Ninetales. Sorry to disappoint you. Once we found ourselves agreeing on some philosophical foundations.
Just real quick, do we know if she had technical difficulties or if she had to go? Okay, well, hopefully she'll be back soon.
Agreed.
I'm still here.
Yeah.
But Rose Malay.
Rose. Sorry, I'm.
Yeah. No
problem. Yeah, so I was gonna say we run into this issue where okay.
What's going on? What are you doing?
I'm still here. I'm gonna leave.
Yeah, can I don't know. Should I respond to reply? All right, I guess I'll just say like we run into this problem where I was gonna respond to a lot of points, but all competition is exclusionary to some degree, right? Like there's already all sorts of we already basically exclude people. Like all forms of competition are exclusionary to some degree, even if we don't really recognize what's going on. Like there's all sorts of people who aren't going to stack up. Maybe it is socioeconomic reasons. Maybe it's something to do with their muscular. Maybe it's due to the fact that they don't have the drive or some other physiological lackings that make it to where they'll never be able to reach certain levels of competition. Like there's always some type of exclusion happening within competition, but we have to decide like fairness is arbitrary, but it's still meaningful to us. And in that sense, like, there's some degree of like perspective of competitive integrity that is meaningful to us, that is important. And I think that, like, when we rush it, we run into this weird problem to where if our society perceives us as having violated some meaningful degree of competitive integrity, then you have in some way harm trans advocacy. And that can sound like it's just giving you an excuse to never like bite the bullet on any trans advocacy positions. But I think there is a way we can navigate this. And I think that seed is already there in the way we started talking about, the potentiality of some kind of version of an open category or some other versions of regulation along other physiological axes. That being said, I just want to make it clear, being taller could theoretically not necessarily translate to you being stronger. And in some situations, it might be a slight disadvantage. But the bigger you are, the more, like, it seems, generally speaking, just a truth that on average, like, that is going to significantly increase your ability is going to be proportionate to your ability, your cap for adding muscle.
In Ninetales' response on that point, for the larger frame with reduced muscles, there is some sort of disadvantage that could occur there, 100%.
Okay, so just to be clear, gang,
sport,
Rose
really,
Malay
yeah.
had to bounce for about 40 minutes. If she can come back, cool. She had something to come up. We miss her. Gang, check her out at It's Rose Malay. I'll put the link in chat, but thank her for being here, and I want to thank her for being here. I'm sorry something came up. We have Ninetales next, and if Madden wanted to say something, feel free. And if PrimeCayes, if you have anything to say, just how to do it. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so specifically when it comes to excluding trans people before we actually know if they pose a threat or not, I think this comes back down to the historical legacy of forcing trans women to prove that they are valid before we actually accept them, instead of giving them a chance to prove things on an actual even playing field, which would be to try out sports and see if they actually dominate. And by this, we're actually limiting their representation and voice on the field where they could prove us wrong. And generally speaking, considering how many probably exist relative to how many qualify as sensational news against trans people, I would say that they're doing a pretty good job proving to us that they're not going to dominate, that they're just going to exist as people who want to play sports competitively. I'm not done. In general, so like, if you want to be a trans ally, don't default to the thing that's definitely going to exclude trans people, definitely going to cause irreparable harms. You want to look at like us needing to give reparations to Black communities now for the damage we gave after not listening to them and just giving them the benefit of the doubt, but keeping them out as long as we could from actual participation. Yeah, that's irreparable. For now, the irreparable harm that Madden is focusing is hypothetical and is yet to actually be founded in real life.
Okay, I'm gonna let you respond to that since you were directly cited. But then we have some Buddy and then Professor Meat. So go ahead.
Yeah. So, you keep saying like being a trans ally is at odds with like favoring this very very niche exclusion, and it's something that Finna also noted is that IOC guidelines were abandoned in favor of like a human rights approach, but that did not necessarily reflect the evidence presented.
Don't get me wrong. I'm 100% for listening to the evidence. That's a different thing. But until there is evidence that we need to start excluding trans people to remedy the issue that we can actually identify.
Well, it seems as though there's.
Just let me finish, please. Until we can actually see and understand. I will let you finish. Until we can see and understand the actual problem itself, and then only then can we recognize the solution. And by excluding trans women by default, we're making a lot of assumptions. First, the biggest one, like I said, assuming that people just simply transition for an advantage.
Okay.
But you're not excluding.
Wait, gang. Madden has to have uninterrupted time here. Let Madden respond. Let's not interrupt her. Go ahead.
So, like, you keep going to this is not being a trans ally if you're for the exclusion, and then you go bring a discussion about elite women's sports to then not only all sports for trans folks in this country, but also you go into reparations, you go into other things that have nothing to do with an ultra niche conversation about elite sports. I would agree that this rhetoric around this issue is being hijacked and being used for this moral panic that, you know, even keeps me from sleeping at night. It is worrying that this has been such a large thing that Ron DeSantis is like massively brought this anti-grooming to the forefront of the Republican or conservative politics. I can see that it is kind of a Trojan horse, so to speak. But if we're talking, you know, in good faith, which we all are here, right, about this ultra niche conversation of elite sports, it seems as though there's a wealth of knowledge that would, or wealth of research that would point to, at the very least, concerns of competitive integrity when letting trans women who have gone through male puberty participate in protected women's categories. There seems to be a wealth of information, and certainly not enough to say that the legacy effects of a male puberty are, I guess, counterbalanced by HRT. There's wealth in one direction, but not the other. And at the very least, I think it would be a moral high road for trans women to not participate in these protected categories until there is a wealth of knowledge saying that there is no difference in competitive
Nine-Tails. I'm going to give you a chance, but we have to get to other people first, right?
Yes. Well,
you guys have dominated this
knowing that.
We've got to get.
I just want my chance to finish to her response that I let her finish to very respectfully.
Can we be under
You
a minute?
interrupted me. What do you mean respectfully?
Can we be under a minute? Then we got to go to somebody online. Then we got to go to Professor Me. But go.
Yeah.
Somebody's
So
gotta
we
get
shouldn't
the
be
last word.
trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist here. This just perpetuates the legacy of keeping trans athletes marginalized and cisgender athletes having the privilege to access that we don't grant to trans athletes.
Okay, somebody, please.
So I just wanted to kind of start out by saying I think that it's really rich that when people started raising their hand while Ninetails was speaking, she goes, I'm not finished yet, when, like, in the middle of everyone else talking, she's constantly talking over them.
I didn't ask me to let her finish that time. I did. And then before that, I interjected.
It's my turn right now.
You ever heard of an interjection before?
Hey,
have you ever heard of an interjection before?
I'm in
I had
charge
to ask earlier.
Buddy, stop. I'm in charge of who gets to speak and when they get to speak. If Ninetails, if you let's not critique how much time someone's taking to speak. That you can DM me if you have a problem with it. Now it's your turn, somebody. Use it wisely. Please go.
I'm not saying anything about how much time anyone is taking. I'm simply talking about talking over one another and how difficult it is for me to be able to raise my hand and say, oh, I have a point, and then 5 minutes later have an opportunity to come back to it because two people have been going back and forth like pinballs for a moment and then all over the place. Like, I'm sorry, again, excuse me. What I had wanted to say back then 5 minutes ago was, what do you guys think would happen to the public of opinion of trans individuals if, say, for example, a group of trans women started dominating all professional women's sports? I'm not sure that it would necessarily be the best thing, and it would cause a potential, again, like I think that Madden was saying, for a lot of politicians to come out and take very dramatic stances in a lot of different ways. And I think that it could potentially be a little bit dangerous for something like that to happen.
So
thank you for the waterworks. We needed the entertainment on this panel, seriously.
They go after me.
So yeah, I'll just say, like, to bridge off of that a little bit, we're talking about a hypothetical harm sort of here. But I think, first off, there's two things. One, if a hypothetical harm is reasonable enough to suspect and bad enough to want to mitigate and to avoid, then talking about a hypothetical harm is not necessarily a problem in a conversation like this and might still be a harm worth worrying about. That being said, if we're going to talk about the severity of the potential harm versus the likelihood of it appearing, first off, I would just say I think we're already starting to see a little bit of that harm pop up in the terms of the backlash that the populace has had to some of the trans movement as a result of this kind of trying to shove a square peg into a round hole of trying to rush the perfect solution, as I've put it, to the transports issue. But on the flip side, I just want to entertain this hypothetical because, like, it has been proposed that we haven't given them the chance to prove it, right? But there is a wealth of evidence around puberty, and that's why that's the line that they seem to draw around. There's a line of evidence specifically around puberty that seems to indicate some advantages, and especially when it comes to myonuclei, it seems like there's some, at least, even though we don't have perfect data, there's a strong reason to believe that these myonuclei can potentially infer some like baseline and ceiling advantages to your ability to gain muscle and develop more nuclei that might not be that might not be conferred through it might not be conferred across HRT, particularly short bursts of HRT.
May I
that being said, I'm just about to finish. I'm sorry. The hypothetical though, if let's say we give 10, 20 years for this chance to be given, for the science to be gathered for athletes. The problem that I think some of the people on the panel and people that agree with me, generally speaking, kind of want to avoid is the scenario in which we do this, and then we have 10 to 20 years, and then we decide, okay, maybe the science wasn't ready, and now the science is more clear. We need to separate these sports. We need to back off. Whatever the case, we fear a world in which now we've gotten to that point, but at the cost of 10 to 20 years of basically incensing the public, incensing the competitive community over these issues in ways that we didn't necessarily need to, giving conservative positions that we disagree with more ammo than we needed to, incensing people against the trans community in ways that we didn't need to, and as well as basically having screwed with the consistency of the sport and the history and the records and other women's, having athletes compete for 10 to 20 years as the trans community grows in population, perhaps having to contend more and more with the issues of the unfair advantages that they're experiencing.
Haley wanted in, and then Matt, and then Ninetales. Go ahead.
Yeah, so one thing I've noticed, and I've looked at this study, I haven't seen them correct for, is where the people who are transitioning, where they fall in the spectrum or on the bell curve of males before they transition. Because if you take, a male who falls on the lower 25th percentile of men, and then they transition, and then you say, well, how does your strength and your speed compare to that of the women in the sport around you? Of course, they're going to fall close to those guidelines because they started closer to those criteria. And I think the case that we saw with Leah Thomas is that they started on the higher echelon of the male category, even though they weren't the top. So then when they transitioned, that's why we saw such the domination and the heightened performance. So you can't just compare them to the female category. We need to look at where they're starting at in the quote unquote male bell curve, and then see where they end up after transitioning. Because just comparing them to the other females doesn't really give you a measure of how effective transitioning was.
Okay, Matt and then Ninetales, please.
Well, Ninetales says, did you have something against the myonuclei bit that you wanted to clarify from me?
Okay, sure, go ahead.
Ninetales?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Because I have more information on that as well, so if you want to...
Yeah, my understanding of it, I'm no expert, but I do understand kind of how muscles work from a biochemical
We're all not experts, right?
Myonucleation seems to be partially driven by testosterone, meaning that muscular repair capabilities after exercise is itself dependent on testosterone. We can assume that with less T comes less nuclei at some point in time, because studies in mice found that it was only a memory, like a muscle memory thing that kept it around, but that it decreased in those mice with the decrease over time. Versus
that's just not true. That's you're
well, whatever. That's what I read. I may finish.
Even if it decreased some, it was minimal.
We still don't know what the true variation of myonucleation between gender categorized populations is to begin with. So it's nearly impossible to say how much of an advantage sexual dimorphism and puberty alone offers.
Okay, so supposedly sometimes next year, a study about myonuclei in humans specifically is going to be explored. I believe in specifically athletes. From before then, though, we can estimate that if someone were to train with testosterone after a male puberty, as your muscles grow, you need more myonuclei to support those muscle fibers. And then if you were to let those muscles if there's atrophy in those muscles, which HRT would suggest, While the muscle fibers shrink, the myonuclei do not. They do not go away. And then if you were to then in HRT expand those muscles, the myonuclei would be able to support those muscle fibers specifically.
So you're saying that this has been specifically found that myonuclei never goes away with the loss of T and muscle and
so we don't
the muscle fibers shrink, the myonuclei do not disappear.
We don't fully understand everything about myonuclei, but they do not seem to disappear. They do not seem to disappear because when muscles grow,
this study that I'm citing specifically talks about how they needed to do it to understand the effects of doping, and that's why they use testosterone on mice with control on female mice with controls. Therefore, testosterone's ability to keep myonuclei at the levels that it does goes away when it's not there.
Maybe we're talking about the same study. Do you mind linking it?
Sure.
Yes, please link it into my chat and link it into my Discord so everyone can look at this. But I do want to pose a question overall because we seem to have a divide here, and I want to kind of get clarity on this and kind of dig into this. That some of the panelists think that we should proceed with caution because there might be harm done by opening the gates too quickly. My question to those of you who believe that, what about the harm done by excluding people based on an overabundance of caution? At what point are we simply being too fearful? And because, again, look at the FINA rule change. I think 12 years old, if I'm recalling correctly, was the age there. This, as Haley mentioned a concern earlier, even, that will this not simply encourage people to transition earlier and earlier and earlier and kind of put a time gate on it if they want to participate? And isn't there dangers there as well? So I guess I have that question. And to those of you, I'll let you answer, but my next question to those of you who are on the opposite stance that think we should open it up while we're still researching, what happens when the research turns out to be that there is competitive advantage? Like, it is much harder and much worse optically to take those things away that you've already given, and we know this is true. So first,
I have a question for you, Wick.
I have to clarify something.
Yeah, I want to clarify.
Real quick.
Yeah, Wick. So what do you mean by it's inherently bad optically? Because I've already pointed out that if we have to do that, then the records that these trans people earn can be questioned and rectified. In the end, I think the only reason it's optically worse is because people have more sympathies for cisgendered athletes than they do for transgendered athletes. I'm being dead serious with that.
That might very, very well be true. I'm not here to argue that. But historically, whenever you take the rights that you've given to individuals away, it's
good luck taking the records away.
Right. Like, it's much worse.
Okay, well, if we're talking about rights, then we can always admit that these rights are conditional on the fact that trans women will not cause these issues, right? So trans women are very much aware that people expect us to do this, and we're also very much aware of how ridiculous that is to expect people to take HRT and have the same athletic performance advantage as they did as a male. I personally don't even walk the same way as I used to. I'm certainly not going to carry a lot of the skills I learned as a guy, or like a lot of the other things that I could have possibly taken psychologically even to there. So I think there's a lot more reason than not to assume that the threat is minimal. And by minimal, I mean by in terms of their population size and the field of competition, and the actual chances that literally every single trans person will dominate, which are to me extremely low.
So here's the thing. It could be the case. It could be the case that those myonuclei levels are just going to immediately drop like they might have in mice. I'm not looking at the study that you're looking at.
I'm not saying they immediately dropped. I said they dropped over time.
That's fine. Okay, then that's fine. They drop over time, but that's part of the problem. So we don't know that it could be the case. And there's some studies that are coming out, like that 8-person study I just mentioned, that seem to indicate that could be the case eventually, right? So that sort of lines up in the abstract. But then we run into the problem of how quickly does it drop, right? So when we look at studies like even after 3 years of HRT, like these differences are still nowhere near really mitigated. Even when we look at even when we look at the differences between the way that trans men change with HRT and trans women change with HRT, there's differences there that we don't fully understand. Trans women seem to benefit more from HRT than seem to make or no, sorry, it's the opposite. I think trans men, they benefit from it disproportionately. There's changes in strength disproportionate between the two groups. We also run into the problem of, like, when we look at these groups, I always lose my train of thought on my last point. But when we look at these groups, there's reasons we can see. Best evidence seems to indicate that like myonuclei stays around to some degree, at least in the period of years. Even when we just look at like if the change in testosterone was enough to necessarily relatively quickly within a reasonable time frame allow myonuclei to disappear because the testosterone levels aren't keeping them around anymore, then we would expect to see that in a natural untrained population in terms of muscle strength decreasing. But we don't see that until a long enough time is gone. And until we can verify otherwise, it seems reasonable to confer like 2, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. There's plenty of data to suggest a risk, a fear of an advantage that's being kept.
If I may ask, just to clarify, what is the actual mechanism?
In here too, so.
Can I quickly what is the actual mechanism that keeps myonuclei around, considering that they are cells that can die and need to be regenerated, and there are biosignaling pathways that determine whether or not they come around? And I'm pretty damn sure that the presence of a Y chromosome is not the main signaling pathway determined for the persistence of myonuclei. It's testosterone.
The answer to that question is hopefully we will find out more as the years progress.
Exactly. We're all just waiting for trans people to prove themselves.
We gotta get Madden in. We gotta get Madden in, then we gotta get Prime.
Waiting for trans people to kill themselves. What are you talking about? Like, are we just gonna cure all trans suicides and fix this athletics issue?
No, I said to prove themselves.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
We're not waiting for. Sorry, I literally just heard that. But we're not waiting for them to prove themselves either, per se. I mean, we're just waiting for the data to come out. Like when we're talking about other exclusions, like people.
Say the truth. You're excluding trans people until the data comes out.
Forms of sports are exclusionary. That's the thing. All competition is exclusionary.
This isn't the same thing. This is not comparable.
It's not the same thing, which is why I wouldn't use that word.
Prime, then Madden. Go.
Okay. All right. Oh, 2 things. One.
Welcome back.
Madden. I think your gain might be a little high in your mic, so just be aware of that. Yeah. No problems.
I appreciate it.
No worries. And Professor Meat, like, do you like click your pen in terms of your nervousness? Is it like an active like graph of your anxiety when you're clicking your pen? I'm a little curious.
It's just a graph of my power. I'm just marinating over here. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. All right. So back to it.
Doing that.
It does seem to correlate, doesn't it, with the.
It gives you an advantage
too. You'll see a lot of those.
Let Prime get his point in. Let Prime get his point in. Come on.
Yeah. So I feel like again, this like arguing back and forth is pointless when we can actually see the results like in the world around us. Like we can talk about like the minutia of the science, but then we can also see that trans women don't dominate. They don't tend to dominate these sports. There are a few exceptions, and there are the ones that the other side latches onto immediately, right? And says, well, it's unfair, right? But like you'll have people say, yeah, well, I mean, how could these women compete against these trans athletes, right? Like they're not going to stand a chance, be utterly dominated. Where do we see this? Where do we see it? It doesn't happen.
Well,
it doesn't.
I would say if we're not looking at exclusively the Leah Thomas example, then like even for the example of Laurel Hubbard, like I believe she
is that the weightlifting one?
Yeah, the I forget. It was like the largest category for weight classes that she qualified for, but did not finish her pull. I believe she like messed up, had some.
I remember that one.
Failure. But for her to qualify in general, she's like the champion for that event was Li Wenwen from China, who was 21, and Laurel Hubbard was 44 competing. Like if even transitioning mid-30s, Laurel Hubbard with between that and with her dad is like a food like CEO who had to step down from being a CEO to being a mayor for New Zealand. So I would imagine pretty wealthy. Maybe I'm being a bigot, but with a lot of resources, Laurel Hubbard was able to compete with people half of her age in a category, to the point where if we're not it's not necessarily the concern about specifically winning, but it's concerned of the opportunities for cis women in these protected categories in elite sports.
Hold on. While I know of the name, I don't know the details of Hubbard. So I'll defer to you. In the facts there. You bring up something interesting, talking about like resources, right? Like
socioeconomic, like
like economic resources. Like we
it's
see
the nature
how...
versus nurture. Nature we've been talking about, but the nurture is also very important as well.
Well, this comes to on multiple levels. Like one, like in terms of the Olympics, right? The U.S. dominates almost everything, right? Like we come through usually with the most gold medals, if not China, right? If not, I think there's one other country that's coming up. It's doing a really good job. But like we dominate. Why is it that we dominate? Like, is it that American athletes are just so much better than all the rest? Or is it that we put a lot of money and resources into developing these athletes and to creating them? And then from there, like winning the Olympics, right? Just crushing it there. Is it that other countries couldn't produce these amazing athletes, or they don't have the resources to do that, right? That they're focused on like basic infrastructure for their nation, right? Like all these things matter, but there's advantages like we don't seem to actually care about when it comes to sports, right? So like talking about when you're talking about an individual athlete, this Hubbard person who has somehow used her economic advantages to allow her to compete in a place where others might not be able to, right? Like do we talk about that? Do we like put that into the conversation? I mean, I can see us like drawing lines that, like, again, not all trans individuals might clear, right? Putting up some sort of barrier, saying that you have not like gone through enough of a process change, right? To be allowed in. But like the people who are most likely to clear those are the people with resources, right? Like let's not deny that. All that factors in. It has always factored in, right? Like the amount of resources that an NFL team can put into its players matters. It has a direct outcome, but we don't worry about that. Like, let's equalize these things. We don't, right? These are just another advantage that you have in sports. But somehow, right? The fact that this person might have had a penis when they were born becomes the thing that's utterly disqualifying, and not any of those other things.
The testosterone levels, right?
Well, I mean, I'm just using penis as a shorthand.
Madden, if you want to respond to that real quick, but then we got other people to go. We got to go to Hallie and then Ninetales. Go ahead.
It seems as if there's one thing common in all of these rulings, is if there's some sort of requirement for minimum levels of testosterone. But I do agree, and I think it's also worth mentioning that the majority of studies, even if we have on trans people as a whole, not only specific trans athletes, it's like white wealthy countries that this data is being driven from, to the point where I think access to resources is very, very important in the conversation, and I would argue important in terms of competitive integrity. But we can't even get the biology kind of straight. So I think that exploring socioeconomic factors kind of
so a question for you, just real quick, a question in that case: would you be in favor if it can be demonstrated that socioeconomic factors could what's your advocacy here for a poor group, a group for the poors, and a group for the rich? Like, what do you want to happen because of this?
I don't know if we're at the point of making rulings around it, but I think it's worth considering the investment in male training facilities and male sports in general when transitioning as well, where we don't need to focus exclusively on like biology metrics for these decisions. I wish I had an answer for you, Wick, but there's no
answer, no shot. Let's move on to the next person who may. Haley, then Ninetales, please.
So I mean, I think that just looking at like restricting it to people that are like under 12 and like the pushback that people have, we're not excluding them. They could still compete, in the male category. If it's all about them being able to still compete in experience of sport, and it's not about them having to dominate, they can still have that experience and they can still compete. Why is it that they have to compete in the female category? If it's not about your advantage, it's not about you having to win, you can still compete in the female category since that's the default. And then once we get more evidence, if that's what people are saying we need before we make any type of change, then make a change. But what we're doing is we're making a change saying, oh, compete, and then we'll figure out the evidence. Well, you shouldn't make the change if you don't have enough evidence to start with.
Okay. Ninetales, please. You're muted if you're trying to speak.
I don't even know where I'm muted anymore. Okay, so here's the thing: is that trans people definitely like do exist, and so the new norm is actually these people don't get to exist because they're not the norm, and we can perceive, especially from a lack of data, an unfair competitive advantage. By the way, Madden, I did drop the ball on sending you the paper. I'm trying to write out an explanation of why I think it substantiates my point so you don't misread it, but I'll have it for you in a second. Like in general, though, I think like what we're talking about here is something that we know. Okay, we know that excluding trans people is harmful to an already marginalized group whenever we do that to them in general. And we also know that that if we don't allow them to compete, then they're not going to be able to actually present themselves on those fields. And that is going to be a missed opportunity for sure. So we're talking about a possible loss versus a guaranteed loss for trans people. So again, I'm saying if you're a trans ally, you should be against the guaranteed loss over the possible loss that will affect a minority, because trans people are already a minority of cis female athletes. Finally, my point, the biggest point, and when Prime brought up somebody brought up different countries, and it reminded me of this. There are countries where women have different height averages just between the country itself. Now, I'm not going to go into race realism or try to justify anything like that, but this just exists. Differences in distribution between population groups. And so we do not segregate based on that. The Olympics is proof of that. Other fields, other kinds of championships that may exist as like a continental thing are proof of that. And it's because even if you do have what is considered by many people who study sport, the ultimate advantage to have, which is a height advantage, even if you have that height advantage, competing is so much more than physical traits and advantages. And that's why I'm saying is that when we do this, we also minimize what an athlete is. And we tell ourselves like, no, like a cis person can't overcome a trans athlete by training better and vice versa. When I'm saying like these things are already minimized. And then once we add in the effects of training and the power of training for an athlete, especially elite athletes over time, then they're even more minimized. I think that we can't just reduce an athlete down to, and fairness down to whether or not an athlete is taller than another.
Okay, so we got to go to somebody, and then we got to go to Professor Meat.
So, like, I understand what we're saying, that we need to divide. I'm sorry, my train of thought completely failed out on me at the last minute, Wick. Go to Professor Meat, I'll come right back.
Okay, so we'll slot you in after Meat goes, and so in 30 minutes when Meat's done pontificating, we'll get you in.
Holy
go ahead,
shit.
Meat.
Here, I'll time myself for you. All right.
I will cut you off way before 30 minutes, just to be clear. Go ahead.
Yeah, fine. So here's the thing. When we're talking about like this differences between races or between different groups, between different ethnic groups, I guess, and different height, for example, like you're trying to point out why this is arbitrary, but like if we started to delineate, we already sort of do things like this. So we have weight classes, right? We can't have weight classes all the time, so we don't, but we do a lot of the time have weight classes when it seems like it would create more competition, more fields of meaningful competition, and that is like actually practical and sustainable, right? Well, no, I get what you're saying. We just
super quick.
Okay, go ahead.
It's because pound for pound, men who have testosterone are stronger than women who have estrogen. And like pound for pound, when you're a male, the
right.
weight that you carry translates to a lot more muscle than the people who weigh less.
I wish the weight I carry translated to muscle, but go on. Yeah. Finish your point.
No, that's absolutely true. But I guess the point I'm trying to say is like if we're talking about that's just one of the reasons I would demonstrate for me for like as evidence for this hypothetical harm. And if we're talking about hypothetical harm versus necessary harm, I think we can debate about basically to some degree the necessary harm is conflated in the sense of that harm is proportionate to how we perceive it. And I really like what Madden has said about like taking the high road, because this is the sort of thing where there isn't really a perfect solution, right? And if we're talking about a potential harm, a hypothetical harm, I don't think it's necessarily worthwhile to say that this is lesser than the harm of not giving trans people
guaranteed harm. It's a hypothetical harm versus a guaranteed
but
harm.
What if,
and the easiest way for trans athletes to prove it wrong is to
what if this hypothetical harm? But the thing is, this hypothetical harm could be really huge. It could be long term.
No, it could be
trans
people are 1% of the population.
Right, but they
and like again, their advantages. Their advantages are minimized.
Just trolling you about interrupting earlier.
Can I have a chance to respond, please?
Can I have a chance? Actually, I haven't gotten to the part where I've said my point.
I'm reclaiming my time.
I haven't even spoken. I haven't even spoken.
Everyone, stop for a moment. Professor Meat, you can finish. Yes, Ninetales, I guarantee you will have a chance to respond. But we gotta let Professor Meat get his point out. Then we will let Ninetales respond. Stop. Nope. Then we will let Ninetales respond, and then Madden, and then somebody. That's the order we're going in. Go ahead, Meat.
I got a little sidetracked with the interaction, but I'll just say, like, the long term, when we're talking about a hypothetical harm, this is the point I remember, is that when we're talking about a hypothetical harm, this hypothetical harm could be severe, and it could be long lasting. There's like I said, like, can you imagine theoretically? I don't think we would get to there, because I think the problem would reveal itself and we would course correct sooner, which is maybe already what we're sort of doing. Maybe this is the beginning of that. But if we had theoretically 10 or 20 years of trans athletes being shoehorned in a way that the science then reveals 10, 20 years down the line, oh yeah, the suspicions were somewhat founded, like we need to change the metrics, or this wasn't practical at this time, and we backroll, like that could be 10 or 20 years of incensing people unnecessarily against your long-term advocacy that you'd like to achieve. Because we all agree in the abstract on the long term, right? Like where we would like to be. We just disagree on how we can practically achieve that in a way that doesn't hurt our long-term goals.
So it's undeniably clear that trans people want this, regardless of the advocacy that you think we're trying to do. Secondly,
they want the long-term goal.
I'll let you finish.
Professor Meat, you gotta let Ninetales finish too, right? Like you gotta let Ninetales finish.
All right.
Secondly, when we're talking about harm being done, this is definitely severe to continue doing to trans people who already have extreme suicidal rates that we see correlate with acceptance. So we do not, unless you want to risk these higher suicide rates, unless you're okay with using trans people and risking their death to protect cis people, then please go ahead and go on with this line of thinking.
Do you think making people hate trans people might have something to do with trans people killing themselves? First off, maybe
trans people don't make other people hate them, okay? Especially not when they're simply wanting what everyone else has.
No, it's not that's my point. It's not necessarily the trans people doing it. So, like, trans people are not a monolith. I'm sure we can agree. Like, even trans people disagree about this trans sports issue to a large degree.
We have at least one on this panel who are disagreeing. Yeah.
Yeah, we do have at least one trans individual. Like, so far, I think I don't know everyone's gender identities, but I'm gonna guess we have a 50-50 split right now.
Everyone's primary.
So we don't necessarily have to contend to the monolith. I think that, like,
you're also treating them as monolith, as if you have to protect cisgender people from them because they're just going to transition to have advantages.
It's not protecting cisgender people from trans people. I know it sounds unintuitive in a way, but what I'm trying to do is not incense cis people against trans people. This is a way of trying to protect trans people. That's the thing. Like, we're all trying to be trans advocates here. We're disagreeing about how to do it.
Hey, speaking of being trans advocates, Madden needs to get in, right?
I just quickly want to say, by doing that, you're actually hurting them, so you're not actually helping trans people at all.
I think that presenting this as the overall monolithic position is actually hurting them.
It's fake. It's fake advocacy.
Madden, go ahead.
I would suggest engaging with the actual, like, evidence, or a clear amount of presented evidence that would have some sort of concern for competitive integrity in this ultra niche conversation. I've said it a million times, but ultra niche conversation of elite women's sports, to then parlay that into this, like, almost bigotry of low expectations of trans people. They're just infantilized by this, like, fear of them killing themselves just because they can't play elite sports. I concede that this rhetoric would, like, as I did before, that this will be used by conservatives to have these bills prop up all over the country, but to weaponize trans suicidality as in
weaponizing
throwing out actual evidence that would point to some sort of concern of competitive integrity.
No, that's a mischaracterization of my argument. That's a mischaracterization.
We gotta but we gotta go after Madden's finished.
Yes.
After Madden's
I did think she was finished. There.
After Madden's finished.
Yes, I know what you're gonna say. We're
gonna go to somebody. Go ahead.
My last point, before we get over to Ninetales, is the conversation then goes to Finna having this very specific 12-year-old thing. Wick asked, like, I don't know, 30 minutes ago if people under this 12, if there's concern that people will either be rushed through the transitioning process, but at the very least, it seems as though they're kind of I think it's a very difficult conversation between the time where kids find out that they're trans to their path socially transitioning and then getting HRT. It's a very, very complex timetable to the point where, of course, if they're elite trans athletes, they're going to suffer more consequences in this, where they might be excluded in some senses. It sucks that we need to then break out a national conversation about kids transitioning and this very, very tense timetable, but I do not think framing that in the discussion of elite trans sports is doing any discussion for allyship any favor.
When we're talking about elite sports, we're talking about competitive differences because that's where it does ultimately matter. When we're talking about kids,
but we're not concerned about that.
When we're talking about kids competing, the goal should be inclusion, because socialization rather than ostracization is better. Ostracization cannot be minimized as a core reason that trans kids specifically commit suicide. And so what I'm saying is that this is a fatal thing to advocate for, in the light of what we already see does kill trans people.
But why you keep saying that they can't?
Hey, Haley, we're gonna get to you next, but somebody's been waiting, so let's let somebody get in there, and then Haley will go, and then we can move on from there.
Okay, so I think that it's kind of interesting. We are talking mostly about trans women being allowed to compete in women's sports. I think that the other side of this that I feel like this decision completely misses is if you have a trans man that is a professional swimmer, at what point do we need to start excluding them from the women's category and allowing them or forcing them into the men's category? And this is kind of the other side of it.
1 year of testosterone. Sorry.
This particular ruling or mention has nothing to say about this at all in any regards. And again, Ninetales, I don't feel like we are necessarily excluding anybody from sport on a whole and causing this general greater societal harm that you're talking about. I feel like we're making a lot of assumptions when we're putting all of this extra weight and baggage on it. I understand where you're coming from by saying that there is a potential, and that if we look at it from this particular perspective, that there is harm that can be done to people. But quite frankly, if someone absolutely needs to be able to compete, nobody is saying that you cannot compete. It's just these are the qualifications and the categories that they have chosen, that they want to base these guidelines on. And again, when we have to look at who is making these decisions, it's a group of people in Sweden that is including people from around the entire world that is competing on the Olympic stage that is making these decisions. And unfortunately, I really think that there's only one representative from the United States and maybe another one from Canada. And man, oh man, there's not that many people that are trans advocates that are probably on this council in the first frickin' place.
Can I ask somebody
just real quick, because Madden had a correction that I want to hear.
It's just a quick question, I swear. Somebody, I believe that all people should have access to sports and that trans people should have just the same rights as anybody else. Do you agree with that statement?
I think that everybody does have access to sports, including trans people, just like everybody else.
I think that's easy to ignore when you're not trans.
Okay, Madden, and then Haley. Because real quick, Madden, with your correction, because you were correcting something.
I don't appreciate your accusations, Ninetales, but thank you again.
Of privilege?
Finna. Okay, so somebody was pointing out how only a couple people are making the decisions. IOC, the International Olympic Committee, had a very, very kind of wide ruling for all sports, and then abandoned that, or that was set in 2015, where they did actually have trans scientists who had done the very limited amount of research we do have on trans athletes, then went for this 12-month HRT requirement, as well as specific testosterone levels. And then IOC in, I think it was earlier this year, I think it was just before the Tokyo Olympics, they abandoned this guideline and let the individual sports make their own rules. So we recently saw the International Rugby Association have their own transphobic ruling. And then we see these individual organizations like FINA creating these guidelines. And in these guidelines, FINA did outline what it means for inclusion of trans men in terms of competitive integrity. They did have specific testosterone levels and different requirements.
Okay,
so
Haley.
They all were included in the conversation.
Haley, please.
Yeah, so, I think someone said it, like, we're not excluding trans people from being able to compete in sports. They can still compete, in the category of, like, the male and female category. No one's excluding them. So if it's so vital to their existence that suicidality is a thing that you have to bring up about not allowing them to compete, they can still compete. That's all.
Well, I think it's
why are people demanding fairness in sports if it's not vital?
Yeah, like if we're saying that trans people will participate in this open category, I don't think we should say that they should expect to win if they're going through HRT.
Well, it's probably just going to become by default a trans-dominated category because many cis people will probably stay in the cisgendered categories.
Well, that's why if we're talking about an open category, then they're other grouped in, something like that. They would still technically compete, but this is why it's an imperfect solution, right?
So are we just talking about co-ed sports here then, where we don't?
Well, no, we're talking about a specifically protected women's category or AFAB category, and then the opening of the men's category.
Okay. Sure. I do have another question, kind of direct this and things like that. Being that
I was going to respond to Haley really quick.
Okay, but then I have to ask my question.
Oh, can I respond to getting called a fake advocate?
Yeah.
What about trans people who agree with me? Are they fake advocates?
No, I just don't think they're informed enough on the issue to come to the proper conclusions, and they're also settling for solutions that hurt trans people.
So are they fake advocates?
I don't know.
You don't know, but I
haven't met them. I've talked to you guys.
So they're not necessarily fake advocates.
So, anyways, Hallie.
So then, what do you think I'm a fake advocate?
You said that we're not excluding trans people.
No, that's so scummy behavior. What a fucking coward. Okay, you can go on now.
You're offended by me calling out the privilege of the fact that trans people inherently have more to lose from this.
What I'm offended by is that you claim to call me a false advocate because the positions that I claim to defend, you think would necessarily oh my god, you won't even let anyone speak this whole panel.
I'm just saying, you're saying I'm offended. I'm not the one speaking.
You claim, oh my god, yes, I'll be offended by your stupid fucking statement. You called me a false advocate because for no other reason that I can tell other than that I disagree with you. And then I point out the fucking hypocrisy of that statement because there are trans people that agree with me.
No, I actually laid out what makes that advocacy.
So can you explain
why? Stop. That's a straw man.
Stop. Please.
You're the one hurting trans advocacy.
No, you don't want me to call it a straw man.
It's literally
don't make me bring out that mute button, gang. Do not.
Can I please respond to Haley now, since I was in
I hate to do it. Let me finish, and then I will decide who goes.
I reclaim my time.
I will mute you just on principle. Keep laughing at me.
I reclaim my time.
Okay. I will. I am against censorship. Changing my mind, everyone. Oh my god. Okay. So, Ninetales, we're gonna let Professor Meat have his day and have his chance, and then yes, you can respond. But Professor Meat will have an uninterrupted time, about a minute. I'll cut him off if he goes on too long because he's long-winded. I get it, but you gotta stop interrupting. We have to have order in this court. Thank you.
It would help if you could frame my arguments properly.
All right. All I'm pointing out is the scummy implications of your argument and the possible ramifications. What you're doing is you're pointing at me. You're calling me a fake advocate. I'm saying, what exactly is the fake advocacy here? Because all you've done, you can't demonstrate why I'm a fake advocate other than I guess that we disagree with each other. Maybe there's another reason. But the funny thing is, when I say, oh, what if a trans person expressed all of the same positions and opinions as me? All of a sudden, they're not a fake advocate anymore. Sounds like the only difference between them and me is the fact that cis people can't have opinions on these things, which is the exact kind of implication of argument that is toxic to the trans movement. that incenses people against the trans movement. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Now, I would say that you're being harmful, but I wouldn't necessarily call you a fake advocate. Although I would say that in the same way that you think I'm effectively being one, and why you're and the way that you're for some reason afraid to like make the same determination of a trans person in a hypocritical way, I would say in those ways, I would say, yeah, I guess you're a fake advocate.
Are we not admitting yet? Holy shit, he's filibustering like crazy after literally just asking me.
I'm done. It wasn't that long. Do I need to break up the stopwatch? Holy shit.
You said you're done. Be done. Let Ninetales, and then we got to go to Madden. So Ninetales, then Madden.
So fake advocacy is accepting harm against trans people that has statistically been shown to be harmful in favor of hypothetical fears that have yet to be realized for cisgendered athletes. It's prioritizing advocating one group over after another. And I still need to respond to Haley, but guess what? I forget, so I rescind my time.
Okay, so you would not catch me in any other discussion other than this ultra niche conversation about women's sports, excluding trans women from spaces. But there seems to be a wealth of knowledge to the point where this conversation is brought up, to the point where I don't think it is helpful to be calling people fake trans advocates if on this ultra niche topic they would go for the exclusion of trans women when in all other spaces we're allies. Even in the conversation yesterday, you were like, we should just keep it to the specific thing, and then you keep jutting us off into other larger connotations for this issue.
I'm doing terribly with that. I'll get that.
Just to be clear, under your definition, trans people that agree with me are fake advocates.
I want to talk too. Can I talk too?
Yeah, I would like to respond to that.
Everyone stop. Okay, let Madden finish, and then if Ninetales can respond, she can respond. Go ahead.
Yeah. I guarantee it kind of you could hear a TERF say what I am saying, and then have that connotation be it that they're only saying that to point out and then use that in bad faith to advocate against trans people, for sure. But if we're trying to engage with the actual facts around it, which you seem to not want to engage about the facts, you keep shaking your head every time I say that there's a wealth of evidence.
Can I respond to that then?
Let her finish. Let Madden finish, and then
I'm shaking my head because I can't respond.
I will mute you if you keep interrupting. I'm serious.
So it's I don't know, it's dare I say stifling of the conversation if you're just shutting down people as fake trans advocates, if we're pointing to this ultra niche specific conversation in which perhaps trans women should be excluded. And instead of letting them participate and then we'll figure it out if it's a problem there, I think we can have these studies be done off the field and then go for those studies instead.
No, so here's why I disagree that there's a wealth of information, and particularly why I'm letting anybody down. Letting people down is perpetuating the violence against trans people that's been traditionally experienced over fears that have yet to be realized in the actual field. This wealth of knowledge that you're pointing to are papers that hyper-focus on traits, which not only have I pointed out that probably isn't sufficient to real experts who actually study this field of information and the other relevant fields to it, but simply saying we're basing these fears on essentializing what an athlete is, especially elite athletes, which trans people need access to become, which is that there's nothing else like training or anything else like that involved. Just because there are specific traits that you're worried about doesn't mean they're going to play out in the way that you're thinking in your head. And so far, the acceptance of trans athletes has proved that you're likely to be wrong.
Okay, so Rose has graced us with her presence once again. I want to give her a chance. I'm not sure if she has been watching or if she's caught up or if she needs time. What would you rather?
I am so sorry. I had something come up absolutely last minute. It will not happen again. Just catch me up really quickly. I don't want to distract from everything going on.
When you're ready to come in, just raise your hand, let me know, and I'll get you in. Is that okay?
I will. Yeah, I will mute myself. I'm so sorry.
So I know somebody wanted in, and I don't know if you wanted in, PrimeCayes, or you just been laughing this whole time. So
no, I've just been laughing and enjoying myself. Thank you, Brent, so much. We're
happy to have you.
Okay, so somebody, then Madden, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. So again, I think that in this particular argument, we are not necessarily excluding anybody from the ability to compete. I think that the ruling that they've made at this, 12 years old, puberty, starting of HRT before this point, again, they're trying to create an inclusive space where some trans women like the most extreme cases where people like have gone down this like absolutely like impossible path, those ones are completely fine. And I think that the ruling is bad. I don't think that it's supported by the proper science. I don't think, however, that we are absolutely like outright like banning all trans women from being able to compete at any type. Like that's not what's happening here exactly. Like I think that we need to update.
I'm sorry.
We need to
stop.
No, but Madden just made a comment at me. Madden just made a comment on me, and I want to respond to that.
Stop.
So, like, that's not what is happening.
Finish, and then you can respond. Then we'll go to Madden. Cool. Okay, go ahead, somebody.
Thank you. So I don't think that that's what's actually
advocates. Madden literally just came in here and said.
Okay, somebody go.
I think that we need to really like pay attention to what exactly is happening and what exactly like is being done with these decisions. I think that it's a bad decision. I think that we need to update the decision. We need to change the decision, but we need to be careful about the rhetoric that we're using and how hyperbolic we're being on certain things, because you end up pushing people away from you. Like my friend down here on the bottom, whose name I can't pronounce for some reason, because I mean, they're just not going to agree with like the rhetoric and then completely disagree with the points.
I think it's Ninetales' turn.
I can't respond, Wick.
Okay, now you can.
You made sure everyone else had a chance first. That's lovely. So yeah, the most interesting thing about this is that, we do have a risk of alienating cisgendered people who don't see this as an issue that affects them directly when trans people are excluded. And then they can just tell themselves that it's not exclusion, because guess what? They were never included to begin with. So why did they get to demand to be included like everyone else is by default has access?
That's a mischaracterization. So I said.
No, I'm sorry, but that's the privilege you're operating on. It's just very clear.
No, you're completely mischaracterizing me, and then you're like forcing words into my mouth, and then you're yelling at me constantly.
Tell me how I'm wrong.
Again, we're not saying that we're not excluding these people because they were never included in the first place. You're saying that we're excluding them from participation.
Then why is it okay to suddenly exclude them to provide inclusion?
You can frame this however you want. And again, I feel like your main issue is that nobody else is willing to accept the framing that you want to put this into. And everybody else is trying to say, hey, this is my position. People by
default are more afraid of the wrong issues. Yeah.
Somebody finish.
And so if you want to be called a better trans ally, worry about the issues that matter to trans people.
But this isn't an issue that matters to trans people.
Do you think
optics doesn't matter nearly as much as inclusion?
No,
making people incensing people, including athletes, against trans people and against their advocacy? Them. Yes, you don't think. All right, so you don't think Republicans or conservatives? You don't think anyone cares about this?
Okay, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to mute Ninetales until you get your point out. Then she will be unmuted to respond.
I'll just ask a question.
Have to do.
Yeah. I'll just ask a question to Ninetales. I'll ask.
Go ahead.
Do you think? It sounds like you're implying that there aren't waves and waves of people, both conservative and moderate, even some within the trans community, who aren't advocating for this, who think it would be a bad idea, and many moderates and conservatives who perhaps don't really don't have a grasp of the dynamics of these things enough to be able to put faith and stock into like some arbitrary nebulous category, who this might seem like a violation of competitive integrity to, even including the actual athletes that are competing in these spheres. Do you think it's like, it sounds like you're saying that these people don't exist, that have trouble with these, that have a problem with these regulations, but we're already seeing the community roll it back. Are you seriously saying that there's not large demographics of people who get angry about these allowing trans people into sports in some cases? Because I would say I just don't think they're all bigots or fake advocates.
No, I'm definitely not, because what I'm saying is that a real advocate doesn't say that trans people need to prove that they aren't a threat before entering a space just because the right wing has found niche cases and bad science to fearmonger about it. And I'm saying that using your privilege to say it's not a big deal doesn't actually speak for trans people. And finally, a trans advocate sees the harm, because we know what exclusion to trans people has done historically, sees the harm and not giving and treating trans people like they're inherently inferior, thus not able to do the same thing as their cisgendered counterparts, and that is, it's even if it's not suicide, it negatively impacts their mental health. If you're okay with perpetuating that, I'm sorry, by default, even if you're trans, you're a bad trans advocate.
Okay, Professor B, I'll let you respond, but after you respond, I want to give Rose Malay a chance to jump in if she feels ready. So respond, then Rose, then we'll go to Madden.
One of the good trans advocates, Rose.
Yeah, one of the good ones. Yeah, that's what seems to be the case. I guess I'll just loosely speak and say, like, people get offended. People get upset about being excluded from sports already. Like, there's all sorts of mental distress that, like, might already be experienced by someone who's unable to cut it into sport. Now, I understand that there's some degree of, like, there's some separation there between the experience that a trans person might experience in their lives. But I don't think that, like, as Madden has pointed out, like, the crux of the issues that trans people have to deal with at a fundamental level, at a psychological level, is not rested largely upon the crux of inclusion in sports.
Yeah.
It's inclusion in society.
Inclusion in elite sports.
I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I'm not. Yeah, that's fine. That's great. And this is inclusion in sports is part of that, for sure. I think that's fair to say. Right? But then we've mitigated this down through several layers of magnitude, down to a factor that's worth looking at. But then once we've identified that, we can have a reasonable discussion, balancing that, comparing that to the what I think is equally reasonable and more likely is this evidently likely is this potential harm, this potential backlash against trans people, which I actually do. I'm almost done. Which I actually do care about. I don't want people to hate trans people. I think that's important.
So I think that this justifies people's hatred of trans people when in reality they're a minimal threat to the issues of cis people.
It's not that I'm justifying it.
And what I'm saying here is that if you value being a cis white girl savior more than actually protecting trans people from the real harm that exclusion advocates for, then I'm sorry. And the fact that you don't understand how that's harming them both are both huge evidence and signs that you're not a good trans advocate.
No, you see, because this is the other thing you said that I didn't quite.
You gotta get Rose in. You gotta get Rose in.
I'll just real quick say that the other thing she pointed out, she said that Republicans are fear-mongering. Yeah, I agree. Both sides fear-monger. Republicans maybe more than liberals. I don't fucking know. But the thing is like, that doesn't matter because she hasn't. We haven't disagreed on the studies. We've effectively, it seems, agreed on the potential science, right? But the science seems to it suggests in my direction. That's all I'm saying. That's not fear-mongering. That's just a descriptive reality that we seem to share.
Rose.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. So when it comes to this idea, like, I agree that if it were just sports in a vacuum, that trans women couldn't be in sports, it wouldn't be the biggest deal. But I don't like it mostly on the principle too, and also because I think it should be allowed. It promotes this narrative that like trans women are like, you know, threatening or more strong or like all these other young girls in sports, which could be used in so many other aspects of transphobia. So it's like, this isn't the hill I necessarily want to die on, but the reason I'm going to fight so hard for it is because of all these other things. Because as soon as they get rid of trans women competing in sports, they're going to go straight to the bathrooms. They're going to go straight to the prisons. So we have to stop them from gaining ground in these areas. And that's basically where I stand.
If we can't differentiate trans women in elite sports from
I need to let you know
broadly trans inclusion in bathrooms, from even from kids sports, different from elite sports, like, I don't know. I feel as though there's some nuance in this conversation that we are willfully ignoring in order to fearmonger around trans people.
What do you need to? Then we got to go to Prime. But
I quickly, I need to go. I actually, I thought this was going to 8, and I had another panel booked. I'll do a 1-minute wrap up.
Okay. Does everyone need to go? Is that a thing?
I've got to go.
No, I just scheduled things because usually you have to.
I can stick around.
Okay. Well, what we're gonna do is we're gonna let Prime have his say, and then we're gonna go into closing statements, and then we'll wrap it up. If you
can I go first, then at least.
Yes,
because I do have another panel. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead real quick. Have your closing statement and shout yourself out. Go ahead.
Okay. So Ninetales Cosmic Fox, debater extraordinaire, real trans advocate, I guess. I didn't even want to go there tonight, but we went there. So you can find me on Twitter at M9Scarlet. That's the letter M, the number 9, and Scarlet with 2 T's. I'm also on Twitch, twitch.tv/NineTalesCosmicFox. That's spelled 9 tails as in like an animal tail, not like a book tail. And that's all words this time. I know it's very confusing, and I hate that I did that to myself. So anyways, quick 1-minute response. So in general, if you don't like being called a bad trans advocate, I feel for you. nobody does. I would hate being called it too, but please reconsider your positions.
You're lucky, then.
Please reconsider your priorities. Just because there's data that seems to prove one side right doesn't mean we should just jump until we actually see the issue playing out as predicted in the fields, because it could just be a false hypothesis. That would be a type 2 error. So thank you very much for your time, Wick. I'm sorry I couldn't stay here more to debunk the misinformation. Have a great night.
We have to wait until the car breaks down in order to perform repairs.
Okay. Prime, please.
Yeah, our friend Rose kind of took my point, but she said it very well, so no worries. But I think, yeah, what Ninetales is trying to say isn't completely unfair, though it feels unfair, I guess, especially to the people who that's aimed at, right? Like, I don't blame you for pushing back, being called like a fake trans advocate when this may be something you're very passionate about. So, no, fair enough. The idea that this is part of a package, right? This doesn't exist in isolation. It's not as if we've imported this idea, like there was some sort of natural emergency and that centered around sports and a trans woman, and then got a dialogue started, and then from there, like, we're reacting to that. No, like, this is a part of a whole list of conservative talking points, right? Trans in sports, right? Also, again, trans in the bathroom, as our friend Rose pointed out. This is a part of a moral panic that we're having at this very moment. One that is, I think, frankly embarrassing, and it's a convenient political tool, like, for people who don't give a shit about sports, right? Like in that one state, I think it was Ohio, right, where they created a bill banning trans girls from sports. There's literally one fucking trans girl that they know of in the fucking state, right? Amazing, right? But this was a big thing, and watch that governor, I think it was Ohio, watch that governor, like, fundraise off of that shit, right? Like, I protected your kids, I did it, right? Because I stopped those mean trans kids from like doing something to your daughter or whatever, right? Like, I'll leave it open for you as to what that might be. So when I guess, and I'm speaking for, I don't mean to put words in the mouth of Ninetales, but, like, I guess maybe why she could react that way, why she could reach that conclusion, is because, like, giving cover for people who are doing this, who are attacking trans people in all these different fashions, even if, like, you're like, well, even if you are a person of good faith and saying, like, oh, well, I'm looking at this evidence, and I'm not really sure, maybe it's reasonable to do this, right? Like, it just kind of gives them leeway to do other things, right? Because it doesn't stop here. These things are part of a package. So once they've figured out you can get rid of trans people in sports, and that people will assist them there, then it's okay. Well, in terms of your transition in and of itself, kids, we can't be sure if they can receive any trans care whatsoever, even if it's just like pausing their puberty. Like, we really can't get anything, okay? But that's just for kids. Oh, well, except that we passed a bill that says people under 21. So 18, 19, 20, even though they're adults, right, and can serve in the army, they can't make that decision as well. What else will they do? They will absolutely move. And then they'll say that the science is on their side. It really is, right? And so then we'll have a discussion about this. We'll have a discussion about how maybe some scientists say that it's wrong for individuals to make this choice themselves to start the transition, right? Or, again, very least, like, puberty blockers, right? It's just another thing, and all of it is based on trans people are scary, and also, like, it brings outrage out in middle America. So I'm sympathetic into what Ninetales was trying to say, even if you said it in a very abrasive way.
Okay,
well, I think that
go ahead.
I think that there's, like, yes, I agree in the existence, I guess, of, like, some people that fight back against trans advocacy, that hold their positions due to some underlying bigotry. And there probably are individuals out there, probably some politicians, who would, like what was that?
Like Destiny.
Oh well, I don't want to. Okay. I see. Okay, I was scared. I was like, I have a record as a Destiny stan, so I don't want to have to breach my credibility. But no, while I do think that these people exist, I just think that there's this weird counterbalancing act where we have to do, where I feel like in the same way that it may not be quite as egregious always, but in the same way that I think Republicans maybe looked at like look at certain inclusionary policies and certain actions in schools and say this is a slippery slope to grooming or something like that, or like where is this going to end? There's some portion of this that is based in some real bigotry, and there's some portion of this that is based in and I guess what I'm trying to say is, in the same way that when they do this, this is alarmist, and I think that this is problematic. I think that we might sort of be doing the same thing when we look at some conservative talking points, and we're not necessarily willing to hear the underlying science and the underlying positions, just because there are groups that are bigoted about it or have some bigoted motivation. Because this seems to me to be a position that isn't necessarily this hesitancy around allowing trans people into sports wholesale doesn't seem to be necessarily rooted in bigotry, is all I should say. And I think that there needs to be a fair conversation about that, because a lot of trans people tend to have more moderate positions on this as well,
sure.
Like we've seen in the panel.
So I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. I want to thank all of you for being here and spending your time. Rose, I'm sorry you had to dip out for half the panel, but we appreciated you being here while you could. Thank you for that. I want to give everyone a chance to have their closing thoughts and to shout yourself out and tell people who you are and where they can find you, right? Like, again, thanks for being here. Appreciate you. Just to let my audience know, Monday, right? Saturday, I'm not going to be streaming this, but you can find me on Bars and Joysticks YouTube podcast. He's invited me, so I'm going to check him out. I'll give you guys a link in my Discord. I'll provide that. And also, on Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern, we're going to be having an all-women panel to talk about the next steps after Roe v. Wade, right? That's the other big story today, that Roe v. Wade got overturned officially, right? And so there's been a lot of talk online. What do we do now? Like, if you support a woman's right to choose, what do you do at this point? And so we're going to talk about that with the people that are affected most by this. And we're going to talk about different advocacy we can do and different steps we can take forward. Less of a debate, more of a conversation. And please check us out there. Again, if you love the content, follow it. If you haven't subscribed yet and you want to, feel free. But we're going to give each of these lovely individuals a chance to have their say, starting with Madden, please.
Sure. So, maybe Ninetales didn't hear it, but I started out everything saying that I wanted trans women to play sports in cis categories, or in protected categories. Apparently that makes me a fake ally. But What is a Woman is a popular documentary these days, and one scene from that is an anonymous interview with one of Leah Thomas's teammates, and she begins saying, we're concerned about the competitive integrity. There are people who might have been able to compete in this final event who didn't necessarily get it. Maybe that's not fair. But then that anonymous student then continues to say, and I really just don't think she should be in the bathrooms with me, which it's like a whole different conversation. And I think I've seen that same thing illustrated even by Ninetales here, of conflating one issue that I think has some merit and nuance that should be talked about, and then extending that to saying, not a real woman doesn't belong in the women's room. Ninetales also brought up, I'm not going to make the entire thing about Ninetales, but she brought up that we're only talking about the nature of it. We're only talking about the biology, and that's not what it entirely means to be an athlete. There's also this the either socioeconomic factors or a context in which they trade in, which I was the first person to bring it up on the panel. I think it's a discussion worth talking about, but I think that also generally lends to advantages that training in male spaces before transitioning can give. I think trans women are women is a very important mantra. However, in this ultra-niche conversation, I think it can do some disservice, and it brings trans people and their allies to walk headfirst into an abyss of turf talking points and and engaging with almost science denial at some points, which is very, very concerning. And my last point before I spam my stuff in Wix chat is on terms of excluding trans women. Title IX categories was made up, and it was excluding men from women's categories. These systems to exclude things, sometimes there's good reason for exclusion. Like we're not letting 7-year-olds drive, right? They're being excluded. They're they should be included. There's reason for exclusion, and that reason is never always bigotry. And I'm going to spam myself in Wix.
Yeah, please tell everyone where they can find you, etc., etc.
On Twitch, I'm a League of Legends dude. I coach collegiate, and I play a lot of League there. And then on Twitter, you can also follow me there as well, where I talk more about politics.
Okay,
But thank you.
Love to have you. Thanks for reaching out and agreeing to come on this panel.
For sure.
Really appreciate you.
It's always a
and your
pleasure.
perspective. Next up, we have PrimeCayes, please.
Any chance I get in there real quick? I gotta go. So
go ahead. Fair enough. Do you mind,
Okay, I
PrimeCayes? We
appreciate
don't want I know Professor's me. Okay. Professor
I
Meat,
appreciate it. Yeah, I'll just say real quick. Hey, thanks for inviting me, Professor_Meat on Twitch. I will be hosting a panel. Well, I don't know if Wick's going to be keep streaming, so I don't want to step on his toes. So I'll keep the plug-in just to the fact that like I'm trying to host more panels, like to be on these panels, and I'll just loosely speaking, I'll just say that like I think that when we make disagreeing with us in our advocacy, whatever it is, when we make disagreeing with our positions being bigoted or being the enemy, we actually hurt the groups we try to advocate for. And loosely speaking, I'll just say like I think we all sort of have the same goals. I think that we shouldn't treat the groups that we're trying to protect as a monolith, lest we risk both infantilizing them and harming them in the long run. I think the best conversations about outcomes are had when we can have these fair, honest conversations about it. And I think that basically on the issue of like the particular issue that this was all grounded originally upon, I think that this is sort of a reasonable step in the right direction. I just think there's a lot of incentive for these things to be studied and for us to figure out new ways to regulate sports and the axes along which we like regulate competition. And I think we just got to be a little patient because we're figuring this stuff out as fast as we can. Thank you all for the conversation. Good night. Good luck.
Professor Meat,
good luck
we
out
love
there.
you. We'll have you on again. Go check him out, gang. We're gonna give the PrimeCayes a chance after he was so rudely interrupted by the white man. Go ahead, PrimeCayes.
Thank you. My brother man, Wick has always got my back, right? So thank you. And just quickly note to my audience, I'm going to stick around after this and we'll have a conversation. There's someone in chat who actually might be interesting, who popped up in my chat. It might be interesting to talk to you, so that might be fun. So stick around, audience members, for that. But still, I do appreciate being here, and I appreciate talking with all the rest of you. I think to respond to Matt, and I know it's a bit unfair because you will have trouble responding back to me, but like that, the scenario you drew, in which a person says that Leah Thomas cannot compete because she has an unfair advantage, and also that I don't think she should be in the same bathroom, right? It's that conflation that I think, I'm putting words in Ninetales' mouth, that I think that Ninetales is talking about, right? Like, that's not a point against her.
That's why I brought it up.
Okay, yeah, okay. It seemed like it was a point against her, though, that in the way you did so. But, okay, one or the other.
Well, yeah.
One or the other. It's that, like, that exact attitude of being under threat from the trans community, right?
And I did concede that point multiple times. Sorry, to Ninetales. So
no problem. Okay, fair enough.
I do definitely get where
we gotta let
yeah, sorry, because you have a place to go.
Yeah. And this isn't an attack towards you, just to be clear.
Yeah.
It's that exact mindset that we have to fight against, right? That trans women are a threat. And this veneer of, again, caring about sports for people, like for a whole host of people who have never considered sports, it's never been a focus in their life. All of a sudden, this super niche issue of a few participants, right, across dozens of sports, right, and thousands of like overall players. Now it's the main focus. They're like, oh yeah, we got to protect the integrity of the sport. I don't buy it. I don't believe it. Not for one fucking second. it's disgusting, right? And so I have no problem calling them out directly. And so they'll say, like, well, we've got the science on our side. One, I don't think you necessarily do. But even so, if you talk to these people long enough, you're going to have that Leah Thomas moment that our friend Madden pointed out just now, right? You'll have, oh, well, there's also other things that I have a problem with trans people being involved in, right? And I don't necessarily have science on my side, but, well, I got my bigotry, so, yep. I'll leave it at that. My name is PrimeCayes. You can follow me at twitch.tv/PrimeCayes, PrimeCayes. Also on YouTube, also on TikTok, and Twitter, and the thing. Follow me. All right, done.
It was nice to have you. I saw you laughing as I was trying to keep control of this chaos. And don't worry, I'll be on your panel soon, and we'll see who has the last laugh, sir. We'll probably just raid out into you after this. I think most of my viewers are going over there already. It's like we were at 40, now we're at 20. So who sees? But next up we have Rose Millay, please.
I'll try to be brief on it just because I didn't, I'm sorry about that, by the way. Let's be fair. If someone is against trans women in sports, but they support trans people in literally every other way, I don't think they're transphobic, right? Assuming that they're arguing in good faith, obviously. A lot of the more extreme opinions on this do stem from transphobia, though. I think the fact that the conversation in conservative spaces is now trans sports instead of bathrooms is definitely progress from where we were a few years ago. And I want to acknowledge that progress. I think the conflation between, like, as some of you have mentioned, between Leah Thomas's teammate of the sports and the bathroom is kind of scary because those are definitely different things. I hadn't heard that till now because I've been trying to avoid the documentary for my own mental health. That being said, I feel like there's a lot of trans women who just want to compete that aren't dominating sports, that they're going to be negatively impacted by this deeply unfair ruling that effectively bans trans women from sports without any nuance whatsoever. I mean, they're the majority of people. The 99% that aren't Leah Thomas and aren't getting rid of women's sports, it's just unfair to put that blanket ban on and they just want to play. So sorry for if something came out completely last minute, I couldn't reschedule it even though I tried. I hope you aren't mad at me and I promise it won't happen again. Definitely won't.
Not mad.
Okay, thank you. I hope it doesn't deter me from being invited back. I promise it's a one-time. Thank you so much. My YouTube channel will be linked below, and it's just Rose Mullet on YouTube, M-U-L-E-T, Mullet. Cringiest take. I make cringy takes on Twitter. If you want to follow me, I'm real Rose Mullet there. But I primarily post my YouTube channel. Unfortunately, not Twitch, but I need to make one.
Oh, that's fine. And yeah, look, real life always comes first, right? Like we do this. This is something that we enjoy. It's kind of a hobby, right? But if something comes up in your real life, always, that'll never prevent you from being invited back. We appreciate your perspective, and I'm sure I'll invite you back on again soon. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate your perspective and really appreciate your willingness to come in. Next up, we have somebody online. Go ahead.
Hey, Wick, thank you so much for including me today. I always appreciate the opportunity to come onto your panels, get to share my opinion, and, watch the different varieties of panel topics. And, it's fantastic. I've got you here. I've got Prime here. We all get to, be out here and, throwing tomatoes at people like all the rest of the folks from time to time. And, man, oh, man, that's a lot of fun. As far as the whole issue that we were talking about today, I do understand where Rose is coming from. There is, this general, trend, and we do have to be very careful about where things go on it. There are a lot of different concerns. I feel like the trans topic has become a lot more prevalent in the social sphere, internationally, because I feel like as science has progressed, it's kind of entered the mainstream, and people have educated themselves or have been educated by people that may or may not have had the best intentions at a lot of time, and it has created a lot of fear. And we need to find ways to provide the proper education to people so that they don't have to be as afraid as what they think that they are, because people are operating under a lot of misconceptions in a lot of cases and in a lot of circumstances. And again, we need to be very careful with the rhetoric that we use and make sure that we are encouraging learning and understanding and not encouraging passionate, excited, overreaction, because it is a fine line that we have to walk, and we have to be very careful when we're trying to, encourage inclusion and acceptance and get more people to take new information. I'm somebody online. I do panels here on Twitch on Wednesdays myself. This week we're talking about Gee willikers, what are we talking about this week? We're talking about personal identity next week. This week, we're talking about child protective services and when it's appropriate to take children away from parents and in what circumstances and situations. And frankly, I think that this topic that we're talking about today may come up, but I certainly hope not. Anyway, we're going to be talking about all sorts of things on that Wednesday, but I do interviews with people the rest of the week and go on people's panels and do all sorts of things. So come by and say hi, somebody online here on Twitch, some dummy online if you want to find me on Twitter. But thank you again, Wick, for having me today.
Always a pleasure. Love your aesthetic, love your takes, love your
the birds.
You're a wholesome dude. We appreciate you.
So cute.
But yeah, check him out, gang. He's wonderful. Last but not least, Haley, I know like it's hard for me to get you in when you're not on camera, so I can see you raise your hand, but I tried to give you some space. Go ahead, Haley. Tell people where they can find you.
No, I'm not a streamer or anything. I think I got in, as much as I wanted to and needed to. I mean, just to the topic of people like Prime say, people who only want to speak on this topic, even though they've never been interested in sports. But Prime has said himself many times that he's not interested in sports, but yet he continues to have these conversations. So to say that he can have these conversations to advocate for it, but people on the other end who don't want to advocate for it are somehow bad actors seems kind of hypocritical.
I'll take that. I'll take that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't think, again, as far as excluding people from sports, I think they can still compete in a category that aligns with their sex that they were born with. So I don't think it's excluding them from being able to compete. It's just excluding them from being able to compete in the female category. So that part, I'm okay with that exclusion because I think that males do have a competitive advantage over females. So in that sense, I would say I would be for just a more severe, I wouldn't say severe, but a more blanket restriction. But again, like I said at the beginning of this panel, I'm okay with this one, even though there might be some things I may disagree with that result from this down the line.
Okay. Thanks again for being here. Appreciate you being willing to kind of be the dissenting voice in this, right? I always appreciate that kind of seeing all sides to a situation, even if some of those sides are very, underrepresented on Twitch, let's say. But I appreciate you all for being here. Reminder to my audience, follow if you haven't, subscribe if you want. We're going to read out into PrimeCayes, who has something interesting to talk to. So if he disappoints you, make sure to spam my emotes. He loves the one with my smiling face and the heart. That's his favorite. Or the one with Kitty Wick. So he loves that. So we're gonna do that.
Wait, we got Kitty Wick emotes? I gotta resubscribe.
Kitty Wick emotes. So wait, bye-bye. Wait, bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay.